The chandelier crashed to the marble floor at exactly 8:47 p.m., scattering crystal across the most expensive restaurant in London like fallen stars. But Adrian Volkov didn't flinch. The 32-year-old billionaire just kept staring at the empty chair across from him, whispering to someone no one else could see. The whole restaurant held its breath. Was he finally losing his mind? His empire was crumbling, his enemies were circling, and here he sat, talking to ghosts over cold soup and priceless jeweled eggs. If you want to know how a shy waitress saved a broken billionaire from destroying himself, stick around until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. You won't believe where this goes. The first time Evelyn Hart saw Adrian Volkov up close, she thought he might be dead. Not literally dead, though his skin had that particular shade of gray that came from too many sleepless nights and not enough sunlight. But dead in the way that mattered, the way that showed in his eyes when he looked at you without really seeing you at all. She'd been working at Le Jardin Eternel for 3 months, and in that time, she'd learned to recognize the different types of wealthy people who walked through those gold-trimmed doors. There were the loud ones, the kind who needed everyone to know they had money. They'd order the most expensive wine and send it back twice, just because they could. There were the quiet ones, old money, the type who wore their wealth like a second skin, comfortable, unremarkable, assumed. And then there were the ones like Adrian Volkov, who wore their money like armor that didn't quite fit anymore. "Table 7 wants you," Marcus, the head waiter, said, without looking up from his seating chart. His French accent got thicker when he was annoyed, and right now it was practically dripping. The Russian. Evelyn felt her stomach twist. She'd been watching Adrian Volkov from a distance for weeks now, ever since he'd started his strange ritual. Every night at 8 o'clock. Always alone. Always the same table by the window overlooking the Thames. Always the same order, borscht barely touched, followed by silence and a small object left on the table before he disappeared into the night. Why me? She heard the tremor in her own voice and hated it. Marcus finally looked up, his expression somewhere between pity and impatience. "Because he asked for you. By name." That couldn't be right. Evelyn was practically invisible here. She'd perfected the art of being unnoticed, a survival skill she'd learned young and refined over 30 years of being the quiet one, the forgettable one, the one people's eyes slid past without stopping. The restaurant's real money came from the flashy servers, the ones who could remember wine vintages and make small talk in 4 languages. Evelyn just tried not to drop anything. "He doesn't even know my name," she said. "Apparently he does." Marcus thrust a small notepad at her. "Table 7. Don't screw this up. He tips better than everyone else combined when he's in the mood." Evelyn took the notepad with fingers that felt numb. Across the restaurant, she could see Adrian Volkov sitting motionless at his usual table, backlit by the amber glow of London's skyline. From a distance, he looked like a painting, beautiful in that sharp-edged, dangerous way that made you want to look closer, even though you knew you shouldn't. She'd done her research, of course. You couldn't work in a place like this without learning about the customers, especially the ones who could buy the entire building with what they spent on a single dinner. Adrian Volkov, 32 years old, CEO of Volkov Industries, an empire built on tech and real estate that stretched across 3 continents. Forbes estimated his net worth at somewhere north of $8 billion, though the number seemed to change depending on which article you read. The photos online showed a different man than the one sitting by the window. In those pictures, Adrian Volkov looked sharp, aggressive, alive. There was one famous shot of him at some charity gala, standing next to a woman with dark hair and a smile that could light up a room. His daughter had been there too, a little girl with pigtails and her father's intense eyes, caught mid-laugh as he lifted her onto his shoulders. That photo was 4 years old. The woman and the child were dead, and the man by the window looked like he was trying to follow them. Evelyn smoothed down her black server's uniform and crossed the restaurant floor, weaving between tables full of people who probably spent more on dinner than she made in a month. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd served hundreds of customers in this place, but somehow this felt different. Dangerous, maybe. Like she was about to step into something she couldn't step back out of. Up close, Adrian Volkov was both more and less than she'd expected. More handsome, in that way that money and genetics combined could sometimes produce. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair that was probably expensively cut, even though it looked like he'd been running his hands through it all day. A jaw that could have been carved from marble. but less alive than any person she'd ever seen. His eyes, when he finally looked up at her, were the color of winter ice and just as warm. "You're Evelyn." His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. British accent underneath something else. Russian, she assumed. "You know about art." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. Her throat felt too tight for words. "The eggs," he continued, still watching her with those dead eyes. "You've been looking at them every night. You know what they are." Evelyn's mind raced. She had been looking. How could she not? The small objects Adrian left on the table each night were extraordinary. Miniature works of art, each one intricately detailed, covered in precious stones and enamel work that made her fingers itch to touch them. She'd recognized them immediately as Fabergé-style eggs, though whether they were genuine antiques or modern reproductions, she couldn't tell from across the room. What she definitely hadn't realized was that he'd noticed her noticing. Yes, she managed. "They're beautiful." "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Evelyn glanced around the restaurant. Marcus was watching from the host stand with narrow eyes, probably calculating whether this was going to end in a massive tip or a formal complaint. The other diners were pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. Adrian Volkov didn't have dinner companions. Everyone knew that. It was part of his mystique, part of what made him the subject of endless speculation in the gossip columns and business blogs. She sat. Up close, she could see the details that distance had hidden. The expensive suit that didn't quite hang right anymore, like he'd lost weight and hadn't bothered to have it altered. The faint scar along his left temple that makeup or lighting usually hid in photographs. The way his hands, resting on the white tablecloth, weren't quite steady. "Do you know why I come here?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head. She knew what the tabloid said, that Adrian Volkov was crazy with grief, that he was cracking under the pressure of running his empire alone, that he was engaging in some bizarre performance art piece that no one had figured out yet. But she didn't think any of those explanations were quite right. "I come here because this was her favorite restaurant." Adrian's voice was so quiet, she had to lean forward to hear him. "Natasha, my wife. She loved the borscht, said it reminded her of her grandmother's recipe, even though I knew for a fact it tasted nothing like what her grandmother made. But she'd close her eyes when she ate it and smile like she was 6 years old again." He gestured to the bowl in front of him, the soup barely touched, already going cold. "I can't taste it," he continued. "I haven't been able to taste anything since the accident. Food is just texture, temperature. But I order it anyway because..." He stopped, jaw working like the words were physically painful to push out. "Because if I stop, it means they're really gone. And I'm not ready for that." Evelyn felt something crack open in her chest. She'd spent so much time watching this man from a distance, spinning theories and stories in her head about what drove him to his strange ritual. But hearing it laid out like this, raw and honest and terrible, was completely different than imagining it. "The eggs," she said softly. "Each one means something." "You did recognize them." Something that might have been surprise flickered across Adrian's face. "Most people just see expensive trinkets. They think I'm showing off or having some kind of mental breakdown. But you actually looked." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out tonight's egg. This one was smaller than some of the others she'd seen. No bigger than a quail's egg, covered in deep blue enamel with tiny diamonds scattered across the surface like stars. When Adrian set it on the table between them, it caught the light and threw tiny rainbows across the white cloth. "This one is Polaris," he said. "The North Star. My daughter, Anna, she was obsessed with astronomy, wanted to be an astronaut. We'd spend hours on the roof of our building, just her and me, looking at the stars through this ridiculous telescope I bought her. She knew all the constellations by the time she was 5, could explain the life cycle of stars like she was reading a shopping list." His voice broke on the last word. Evelyn watched him fight for control, watched him lock everything dangerous back down behind that icy expression. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, but it cost him something to make it that way. "I leave an egg every night," Adrian said. "Each one represents something about them, something I don't want to forget. Natasha loved music. There's an egg with a tiny music box mechanism inside. Anna was learning to paint. There's one covered in miniature replicas of famous artworks, their favorite colors, the places we traveled, the dreams they had." "That's not madness," Evelyn said quietly. "That's love." Adrian laughed, but it was a harsh sound, nothing warm in it. Tell that to my board of directors, or the investors who are pulling out because they think I'm unstable, or Marcus Kane, who's using my grief-induced delusions as ammunition for a hostile takeover of my company. He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time since she'd sat down, his eyes focused on her, really focused, like he was actually seeing her instead of looking through her to something else.
"Why are you here, Evelyn Hart?" he asked. "And don't tell me it's because you need the job. I had you investigated. Art history degree from Cambridge. Could be working at any museum in the country. Instead, you're serving soup to people who don't remember your name. Why?"
The question hit harder than it should have. Evelyn felt herself go still, felt all her carefully constructed defenses snap into place. She'd gotten good at deflecting this kind of inquiry, at giving answers that sounded true without actually revealing anything important. But something about the way Adrian was looking at her, like he already knew the answer and was just waiting to see if she'd be honest, made the practiced lies stick in her throat. "Because museums wanted me to talk about art to strangers," she said finally. "And I'm not good at talking to strangers. Or talking in general. I'm good at looking, at noticing things other people miss. But you can't build a career on being quiet and observant. You have to perform. You have to be confident and charismatic and all the things I'm not. So you hide in a restaurant serving people who don't see you. I'm not hiding. She stopped. "Yes, I'm hiding." Adrian nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he suspected. "We're both hiding then. Me behind my ritual. You behind your silence. Two ghosts haunting the same building." The words should have sounded melodramatic, but they didn't. They sounded true. Evelyn felt a strange kinship settle over her, unexpected and uncomfortable. She'd spent 3 months watching this man from a distance, feeling sorry for him, trying to understand him. It hadn't occurred to her that they might be more alike than different. "The eggs," she said, changing the subject back to safer ground. "They're real, aren't they? Fabergé originals?" "Some of them. Others are modern commissions made by one of the last master craftsmen who still knows the techniques. Cost me a fortune, but..." He shrugged. "What else am I going to spend it on? Can't take it with me. And it's not like I have anyone to leave it to anymore." The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. Evelyn wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the pain she could see etched into every line of his face. But she'd never been good at comfort, at finding the right words when they mattered most. So instead she just sat there, quiet and useless, while Adrian Volkov stared at the cold soup and the miniature stars scattered across the table. "Do you believe in ghosts?" he asked suddenly. What?" "Ghosts. The supernatural. The idea that the people we love don't really leave us. They just exist on some other plane we can't quite reach." His eyes fixed on the empty chair across from him. "Because I can feel them here, every night. I sit down and I can feel Natasha next to me, can almost hear her laugh when I tell her about the idiots I had to deal with at work. I can feel Anna climbing into my lap, sticky fingers from whatever dessert she snuck before dinner, asking me to explain quantum physics or the French Revolution, or why people fall in love. I know it's not real. I know they're dead and gone and never coming back. But for 1 hour every night, I let myself pretend otherwise." Evelyn's throat felt tight. "I don't think that's crazy." "No?" Adrian's smile was knife-thin. "Then you're the only one. My therapist says I'm engaging in maladaptive coping mechanisms. My board says I'm embarrassing the company. The media says I'm having a very public nervous breakdown. And Marcus Kane says I'm unfit to run my own company, and he should take over before I destroy everything my father built." "What do you say?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the blue egg with its constellation of tiny diamonds. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "I say they're probably right. I can't sleep, can't focus. Half the time I'm in meetings, I'm not even listening because I'm thinking about Anna's 7th birthday party that she never got to have, or the anniversary trip Natasha planned that we never took. I'm running a multi-billion-dollar company on autopilot, and everyone can see it. It's only a matter of time before something breaks." "Then why keep doing this?" Evelyn gestured at the table, the soup, the egg. "If it's hurting you, because it's all I have left." The rawness in Adrian's voice made her chest ache. "These dinners, these eggs, these stupid one-sided conversations with people who aren't there anymore. Take that away and I'm just nothing. An empty suit running an empire I don't even care about anymore." At least this gives me a reason to get out of bed. At least this makes me feel something other than numb. He picked up the blue egg, turning it over in his hands so the diamonds caught the light. His fingers were long and elegant, the hands of an artist rather than a businessman. Evelyn found herself wondering if he'd always been like this, intense and wounded and barely holding himself together, or if the accident had broken something in him that couldn't be fixed. "Tell me about them," she said quietly. "If you want to." Adrian looked up, surprise clear on his face. "What? Your wife? Your daughter? Everyone else just sees the tragedy, the before and after, but you knew them as people. What were they really like?" For a long moment, Adrian just stared at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. Not quite warmth, but at least a thawing of the ice. He set the egg down carefully and leaned back in his chair. Natasha was... He stopped, started again. Everyone talks about how beautiful she was. And she was, obviously. But that wasn't the important part. She was fierce, terrifying when she was angry. She grew up in St. Petersburg, came to London with nothing but a dance scholarship and a suitcase held together with duct tape. By the time I met her, she was principal dancer with the Royal Ballet and taking business classes at night because she knew her body wouldn't last forever. Adrian's voice was different now, softer, more alive. We met at a fundraiser I didn't want to attend. She cornered me by the champagne fountain and told me my company's diversity initiatives were performative nonsense. Spent 20 minutes explaining exactly how I was failing and what I should do instead. I was furious and completely in love before she finished talking. Despite everything, the sadness, the weight of the conversation, Evelyn felt a smile tug at her lips. She could picture it perfectly. Adrian, probably younger and cockier, getting taken apart by a tiny ballet dancer with strong opinions and no filter. "She sounds incredible," Evelyn said. She was. She retired from dance after Anna was born, started consulting for arts organizations instead, made more enemies than I did, which is saying something. But people respected her because she was usually right. His expression darkened. The night of the accident, we'd been fighting. Stupid argument about Anna's school. Natasha wanted to send her to some progressive place with no grades and meditation classes. I thought it was ridiculous. We were both being stubborn, and neither of us would back down. He stopped, jaw clenched so tight Evelyn could see the muscle jumping. The last thing I said to her was that she was being unreasonable. And then she took Anna and left, and I sat in my office being angry and righteous, and 3 hours later the police were at my door telling me there'd been an accident on the M4 and my family was dead. "Adrian, don't." He held up a hand, stopping her. "Don't say you're sorry. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. I've heard it all before and it doesn't help. If I hadn't been such an ass, if I'd just apologized, they would have stayed home that night. They'd still be alive." Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that he couldn't have known, that he wasn't responsible for a drunk driver running a red light. But she could see in his eyes that he'd never believe it. Grief didn't respond to logic. It just sat there like a stone in your chest, heavy and immovable, no matter how many people told you it wasn't your fault. "What about Anna?" she asked instead. "What was she like?" The change in Adrian was immediate. Some of the tension bled out of his shoulders, and his expression shifted to something that was almost, briefly, fond. "Anna was a nightmare," he said, and this time there was real affection in his voice. Brilliant and stubborn, and absolutely convinced she knew better than everyone else about everything. She was 6 years old and reading at a 10th grade level. Her teacher kept calling us in for conferences because Anna would correct her during lessons. Not to be mean, Anna genuinely couldn't understand why anyone would teach something incorrectly when the right answer was so obvious. He picked up the blue egg again, cradling it like something precious. She wanted to be the first person to walk on Mars. Had her whole life planned out by the time she was 5. Would tell anyone who'd listen about her plans to study astrophysics at Cambridge, work for NASA, command the first Mars mission. When I told her NASA was American and she was British, she just looked at me like I was an idiot and said she'd have dual citizenship by then, obviously. Evelyn found herself laughing despite the sadness of it all. She could picture the little girl so clearly, all confidence and big dreams, the kind of child who'd probably terrified and delighted her teachers in equal measure. "She sounds like she was exactly like you," Evelyn said. "That's what Natasha always said, that Anna had my personality with her own volume turned up to 11. Every stubborn bone in my body, every impossible standard, every refusal to accept no as an answer, all of it magnified. Natasha used to joke that karma was just me raising myself and realizing how insufferable I'd been as a kid. His smile faded as quickly as it had appeared. Anna would be 10 now, starting to figure out who she wanted to be, probably driving us crazy with her plans and her questions and her absolute certainty about everything. Instead, He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the words that couldn't be said, all the futures that would never happen. Evelyn reached across the table, not quite touching him, but close enough that he could feel the offer of connection if he wanted it. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for telling me about them, for letting them be people instead of just a tragedy." Adrian looked at her hand, hovering near his, and for a moment she thought he might take it. But then he pulled back, wrapped his arms around himself like he was cold despite the warmth of the restaurant. "I should go," he said, standing abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor loud enough that several nearby tables looked over. "I've kept you too long. You probably have other customers waiting." It was a dismissal, clear and sharp, but Evelyn could see the panic underneath it, the realization that he'd said too much, shown too much, let someone see past the armor he'd built around his grief. She stood as well, smooth and professional, slipping back into her role as the invisible waitress. "Of course, Mr. Volkov," she said. "Will we see you tomorrow night?" He paused in the act of pulling out his wallet. "Why would you ask that?" "Because..." She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Because I'll be working tomorrow night too. And if you're here, I'd like to hear more about them. If you want to tell me." Adrian stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled out several bills, far more than the meal cost, probably more than she made in a week, and set them on the table next to the blue egg. "Keep it," he said when she started to reach for the egg. "Consider it payment for listening to a broken man ramble about the family he couldn't save." "You're not," Evelyn started, but he was already walking away, moving through the restaurant like a shark through water, smooth, predatory, and utterly alone. She watched him go, watched the other diners track his movement with hungry eyes, already pulling out their phones to text their friends about Adrian Volkov's latest bizarre behavior. Tomorrow, there would probably be another article about the mad billionaire of Mayfair, complete with speculation about his mental state and his company's future. But Evelyn wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the way Adrian's voice had softened when he talked about his daughter's dreams, about the raw grief in his eyes when he described his last fight with his wife, about the way he'd opened up to her, a nobody waitress he had no reason to trust, because she'd bothered to actually look at his ritual instead of just judging it. She picked up the blue egg, feeling the weight of it in her palm. Real diamonds, definitely. Probably worth more than her car, her apartment, and everything she owned combined. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, each tiny star perfectly placed, the enamel work flawless, the mechanism that made it open, if it opened, invisible to the naked eye. A memorial. A love letter. A desperate attempt to keep two people alive in the only way he knew how. Evelyn closed her fingers around the egg and made a decision that would change everything, though she didn't know it yet. She wasn't going to let Adrian Volkov destroy himself with his grief, and she wasn't going to let his enemies use that grief as a weapon against him. She had no idea how to help a billionaire save his empire. She barely knew how to save herself most days, but she knew art and she knew symbols, and she understood the language Adrian was speaking through his nightly ritual better than anyone else seemed to. It would have to be enough. "Evelyn?" Marcus appeared at her elbow, his expression carefully neutral in that way that meant he was absolutely furious about something. "My office. Now." She followed him through the kitchen, past the line cooks who pretended not to watch, into the cramped back office that smelled like old coffee and disappointment. Marcus shut the door behind them with more force than necessary. "What exactly," he said, voice tight with controlled anger, "did you think you were doing out there?" "He asked me to sit with him. You told me not to screw it up. I told you to serve him, not have a therapy session at his table for half an hour while your other customers waited." Marcus crossed his arms. "Do you have any idea who Adrian Volkov is? What kind of pressure he's under? The last thing that man needs is some waitress playing amateur psychologist." The words stung more than they should have. Evelyn felt herself shrinking back into her usual role, quiet, apologetic, desperate not to make waves. But then she thought about Adrian's face when he talked about his daughter, about the way he'd trusted her with something real and painful and true. He wasn't looking for a psychologist, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. He was looking for someone who understood what the eggs meant. And I do. That's all. Marcus studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed and dropped into his desk chair. Volkov left you a 1,500-pound tip and requested you specifically as his server for every night going forward. So I suppose I can't fire you, even though you absolutely deserve it for abandoning your section. 1,500 pounds. Evelyn felt dizzy. That was more than she made in a month. I didn't abandon. You did. Table 12 waited 20 minutes for their wine. Table 9 never got their desserts. Table 6 complained that you disappeared mid-service. Marcus rubbed his temples. But you also just became our most valuable server because Adrian Volkov likes you, for reasons I cannot begin to understand. So congratulations. You're his personal waitress now. Don't screw it up. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like she'd just been handed a responsibility she had no idea how to manage. But she nodded and thanked Marcus and escaped back to the floor, back to the safe anonymity of serving people who didn't see her. The blue egg was still in her pocket, solid and heavy, against her hip. She should probably return it. It was worth a fortune, and keeping it felt wrong somehow. But Adrian had told her to keep it. Payment for listening, he'd said. She pulled it out when she got home that night, to her tiny studio apartment in a part of London where billionaires definitely didn't visit. Under the harsh fluorescent light of her bathroom, the egg looked even more beautiful. Each diamond caught the light differently, creating a tiny constellation that probably matched a real star pattern if she knew enough about astronomy to check. Evelyn set it on her bedside table and lay awake for hours, thinking about a man who had dinner with ghosts, and a little girl who'd wanted to walk on Mars, and a woman who'd been fierce enough to make a billionaire fall in love at first argument. She thought about Adrian Volkov's dead eyes and broken voice, and the way he'd looked at her like she might actually understand. And she thought about Marcus Kane and hostile takeovers, and an empire crumbling because everyone mistook grief for weakness. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, Evelyn started to form a plan. It was crazy, probably impossible. Definitely not something a shy waitress with no business experience should even attempt. But she'd spent 30 years being quiet and careful and invisible. Maybe it was time to try being something else. Tomorrow night, when Adrian came back, if he came back, she'd be ready. Adrian didn't come back the next night. Evelyn told herself it didn't matter. She had other tables to serve, other customers who actually noticed when she refilled their water glasses or brought their entrees at the perfect temperature. But she couldn't stop glancing at table 7. Couldn't stop expecting to see him walk through the door at exactly 8 o'clock like he had every night for months. The table stayed empty. Marcus seated a couple there instead, young, loud, the kind who took photos of their food before eating it. They didn't leave a 1,500-pound tip. He's not coming, Marcus said when he caught her staring for the 3rd time that night. Whatever you said to him yesterday scared him off. Congratulations. But Evelyn didn't think it was fear. She'd seen fear in Adrian's eyes, sure, but it had been pointed inward, fear of himself, of what he was becoming, of the empire crumbling around him while he sat paralyzed by grief. What she'd seen when he walked away was something different. Shame, maybe. The kind that came from showing someone your worst wounds and then remembering that vulnerability was dangerous. She went home that night and stared at the blue egg on her nightstand until her eyes burned. Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled out her old Cambridge notebooks, the ones from her art history seminars, and started researching. Fabergé eggs weren't just expensive trinkets. They were a language. Each one Peter Carl Fabergé created for the Russian imperial family had told a story, contained surprises, represented something meaningful. The coronation egg held a replica of the imperial coach. The rosebud egg opened to reveal portraits and a diamond-studded crown. They were art and message and memory all rolled into jeweled shells small enough to hold in your palm. Adrian was doing the same thing. Each egg was a story about the people he'd lost, a code he was writing in precious metals and gemstones because words weren't enough to contain what he felt. Evelyn spent 3 days buried in research. She used her library card to access academic databases, pulled up auction records of Fabergé pieces, studied symbolism in Russian imperial art. She barely slept, barely ate. Marcus yelled at her twice for zoning out during her shifts, but she couldn't help it. Her brain was spinning with possibilities. On the fourth night, Adrian returned. Evelyn was refilling water glasses at table 12 when she saw him. Same suit, same dead-eyed expression, same precise movements as he crossed the restaurant floor. But something was different. He looked thinner, if that was possible. The shadows under his eyes were darker. His hand shook slightly as he pulled out his chair. She forced herself to finish with table 12 before approaching him. Professional, calm, like her heart wasn't hammering against her ribs. "Mr. Volkov," she said when she reached table 7. "Your usual?" He looked up at her, and for a second she saw surprise flicker across his face, like he'd expected her to pretend their conversation had never happened, to go back to being the invisible waitress who just brought soup and disappeared. "You kept the egg," he said instead of answering. "You told me to." "I tell my board of directors a lot of things. They rarely listen." Adrian gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit." "I'm working. Marcus will survive." "Sit." Evelyn sat. She could feel eyes on them from across the restaurant. Other servers, customers, probably Marcus himself having an aneurysm at the host stand. But Adrian's attention was entirely on her, focused and intense in a way that made her want to squirm. "I shouldn't have dumped all of that on you," he said quietly. "The other night, that wasn't fair." "You didn't dump anything. I asked." "You asked to be polite. You didn't actually want to hear a stranger's grief spiral." He picked up his menu even though they both knew he'd order the same thing he always did. "I've been told I make people uncomfortable when I'm honest, that I should keep things lighter, more appropriate." "Who told you that?" "My therapist, my PR team, my mother, before she stopped speaking to me entirely." Adrian set the menu down without looking at it. "They're probably right. Nobody wants to have dinner with someone who can't stop talking about his dead family." Evelyn felt something sharp twist in her chest. "I do." He went very still. "What?" "I want to hear about them. About Natasha and Anna. About who they were and what they meant to you." She leaned forward, surprising herself with her own intensity. Everyone else sees the tragedy, the accident, the before and after. But nobody talks about the during, about the actual people who lived and laughed and drove you crazy. And I think that's wrong. Adrian stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Why?" "Because," Evelyn hesitated, trying to find words for something she'd felt but never articulated. "Because reducing people to just their deaths is another kind of loss. Your wife was a fierce ballet dancer with strong opinions. Your daughter wanted to walk on Mars. Those things matter. Those things should be remembered. Not just that they died, but how they lived." Something cracked in Adrian's expression. Not quite tears, but close. He looked away, jaw clenched, fighting for control. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "The blue egg. The one I gave you. Did you figure out what it meant?" "Polaris, the North Star. Because Anna loved astronomy." "She did. But that's not the only reason." Adrian pulled another egg from his pocket. This one was green, covered in what looked like tiny emerald leaves. "Polaris is the constant, the star that doesn't move while everything else spins around it. When I was teaching Anna about navigation, about how sailors use the stars to find their way home, she asked me what my North Star was, what kept me grounded when everything else was chaos." He set the green egg on the table between them, not quite meeting her eyes. "I told her it was her and her mother, that as long as I had them, I'd never be lost." His laugh was bitter. "Didn't account for what happens when your North Star disappears. Turns out you just spin in circles in the dark." Evelyn picked up the green egg carefully. Up close, she could see that the leaves were actually tiny emeralds, each one individually set. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. "What's this one?" "Birch trees, Natasha's favorite. She grew up near a birch forest in Russia, used to tell me stories about playing there as a child. When we bought our house in Surrey, she had birch trees planted all around it. Said she wanted Anna to grow up with the same magic she had." He paused. "I sold the house 6 months after the accident. Couldn't stand walking past those trees every day." The rawness in his voice made Evelyn's throat tight. She wanted to say something comforting, but every platitude that came to mind felt hollow and useless. So instead she just held the egg and waited. "I have 63 of them now," Adrian said after a long silence. 63 eggs, each one a different memory. Some nights I can barely remember which one means what. Other nights the memories are so clear it feels like they're sitting right here with me. Is tonight a clear night? He considered this. Clearer than most. Maybe because you're here. Maybe because I'm tired of being alone with them. A waiter appeared with Adrian's borscht, setting it down with practiced efficiency before disappearing. Adrian stared at the bowl like it was something foreign. I lied to you, he said quietly, the other night, when I said I couldn't taste anything. Evelyn waited. I can taste it. It tastes like nothing, like sadness in a bowl. But I order it anyway because Natasha loved it, and if I stop, it's like admitting she's really gone, that I'm really alone, that I'm never going to walk into this restaurant and see her sitting here waiting for me. He picked up his spoon but didn't eat, just stirred the soup in slow circles. Do you know what the worst part is? Adrian's eyes were fixed on the bowl. It's not the big moments. It's not the anniversaries or the birthdays or walking past the room that used to be Anna's. It's the small things, making coffee and automatically pouring 2 cups. Hearing a joke and turning to tell Natasha before remembering she's not there. Seeing something beautiful and thinking Anna would love this, I should show her. And then reality hits and it's like losing them all over again. Evelyn's chest ached. That's not the worst part, she said quietly. The worst part is when the small things stop. When you forget to pour the second cup. When you see something beautiful and don't think to share it, because that feels like losing them twice. Adrian's spoon clattered against the bowl. His hands were shaking. How did you... Oh, my father died when I was 16, Evelyn said. Heart attack. Just collapsed in the kitchen one morning, making his terrible coffee that he somehow always burned even though we had an automatic machine. She'd never told anyone this story, not in years, but something about Adrian's honesty demanded her own. For months after, I'd wake up expecting to smell burned coffee, would set out 2 mugs, would catch myself saving funny stories to tell him at dinner, and then one day I didn't. One day I forgot. And that was worse than any of the crying or the funeral or the first Christmas without him. What did you do? I started writing things down. Little memories, stupid things he said, jokes he'd make, the way he'd sing off-key in the shower. I filled 3 notebooks with tiny details that I was terrified of forgetting, because at least if I wrote them down, they'd be real. They'd exist outside my head. Adrian was watching her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. Do you still have the notebooks? I lost them in a move about 5 years ago. Entire box of my things just disappeared between apartments. Evelyn felt the old grief rise up, unexpected and sharp. I was devastated, like I'd lost him all over again. But then I realized I didn't need the notebooks. The important things were already part of me. The way I drink my coffee, the books I read, the terrible jokes I think are funny. He's in all of it. That's not the same. No, Evelyn agreed. It's not. Because I had 16 years with my father, and then he was gone. You had your family ripped away when you still had decades ahead of you. When Anna was supposed to grow up and Natasha was supposed to grow old with you, it's not the same at all. But the fear is. The terror of forgetting, of having the memories fade until you can't quite remember the sound of their voice or the exact shade of their eyes. Adrian set down his spoon carefully. Anna's eyes were hazel, green with gold flecks. She hated them, wanted blue eyes like Natasha's. I told her hazel was better because it changed color depending on what she wore. She told me that was stupid and unscientific, and eye color was determined by melanin concentration, not clothing. Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. She sounds exhausting. She was. The best kind of exhausting. The kind where you're frustrated and proud and terrified all at once because you've created this tiny human who's already smarter than you and absolutely knows it. His expression softened. Natasha used to joke that we should get Anna tested for genius programs. I was against it. Didn't want her growing up thinking she was better than everyone else. We fought about it constantly. Who won? Nobody. We were still fighting about it when they died. Adrian's voice went flat. Natasha thought I was holding Anna back. I thought she was pushing too hard too fast. Looking back, we were probably both wrong, but we'll never know now. The silence stretched between them, heavy with all the arguments that would never be resolved, all the compromises that would never be reached.
Evelyn wanted to fill it with something meaningful, but every word that came to mind felt inadequate.
The eggs, she said finally. You're building a memorial, a way to keep them alive through art. I'm trying to hold on to something that's already gone. There's a difference. Is there? Evelyn leaned forward. Peter Carl Fabergé created eggs for the imperial family to commemorate important moments. Each one told a story, contained surprises, represented something that mattered. You're doing the same thing, creating a legacy, a record of who they were and what they meant. Adrian shook his head. Fabergé created art. I'm just a broken man playing with expensive toys. You're wrong. The certainty in her voice surprised them both. Adrian's eyebrows rose. Am I? Yes. Because what you're doing has meaning. It's a language. Every egg is a sentence in a story only you can tell. And that's not madness. That's love translated into something tangible, something that exists outside your head. My board of directors would disagree. So would Marcus Kane. So would every business analyst who's been writing articles about my declining mental state and how it's affecting company performance. They don't understand what they're looking at. And you do? Evelyn met his eyes steadily. I understand art. I understand symbolism. I understand that what you're creating is a memorial that happens to be worth millions of pounds. And I understand that your enemies are using your grief as a weapon because they can't compete with you any other way. Something flickered across Adrian's face. Surprise, maybe. Or the beginning of hope. You've been reading about me. I have. Marcus Kane. Hostile takeover. Using your nightly dinners as evidence that you're unfit to run your company. Evelyn pulled out her phone. She'd saved articles, made notes, spent hours piecing together the business side of Adrian's life. He's been giving interviews about how your unstable behavior is putting shareholder value at risk, building a case that you need to step down. He's not wrong. I am unstable. I am putting the company at risk. I haven't closed a major deal in 8 months. I've missed board meetings. I've let important partnerships fall apart because I couldn't focus long enough to negotiate terms. Adrian's voice was flat, defeated. Maybe Kane taking over would be better for everyone. Do you believe that? I don't know what I believe anymore. Evelyn set her phone down and reached across the table. This time, when her hand hovered near his, Adrian took it. His fingers were cold, his grip almost painfully tight. Your company employs 14,000 people, she said quietly. 14,000 people whose jobs depend on Volkov Industries staying stable. Do you really think Marcus Kane cares about any of them? Or do you think he sees a profitable company he can strip for parts? Kane's a shark. But he's a competent shark. The company would survive. Survive isn't the same as thrive. Your father built Volkov Industries from nothing. Natasha helped you expand it. You've created something that matters. And Kane wants to tear it apart for profit. She squeezed his hand. Don't let your grief become his weapon. Adrian pulled his hand back, scrubbing it across his face. You don't understand. I can't fight him. I can barely get through a single day without falling apart. How am I supposed to battle a hostile takeover when I can't even finish a bowl of soup? You stop fighting alone. I am alone. That's the point. You're not. Evelyn surprised herself with the force of her words. You have me. You have employees who are loyal to you. You have people who believe in what Volkov Industries stands for, not just what it's worth. You're a waitress. No offense, but what are you going to do against a corporate raider with unlimited resources? The words should have stung. Instead, Evelyn felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. I'm going to help you turn your memorial into a message. I'm going to help you show the world that your grief isn't weakness. It's humanity. And humanity is exactly what your company needs right now. Adrian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. That's insane. Maybe, but it's better than giving up. She pulled out a napkin and started writing. The Anna Volkov Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting talented children in science and arts, funded by you, promoted by your company. Each egg becomes part of the foundation's origin story, a father's love for his daughter, translated into opportunities for other children. You're serious, completely serious. Kane is painting you as unstable and broken. We paint you as grieving but purposeful. A man who lost everything and chose to build something meaningful from the loss. We take the narrative away from him. Adrian was quiet for a long time, staring at the napkin where Evelyn had sketched out her idea in broad strokes. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. It won't work. Kane's already too far ahead. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. By then we'll have a complete foundation proposal, press releases, a launch event. We'll beat him to the punch. We. Adrian's smile was thin. You keep saying we like you're invested in this. I am invested. I've been watching you destroy yourself for 3 months. I'm not going to stand by and watch your enemies finish the job. Evelyn stood up, suddenly aware that she'd been sitting for too long, that other tables needed her attention, that Marcus was probably furious. I have to get back to work, but tomorrow. We need to talk tomorrow, not here, somewhere private where we can actually plan. My office? No. Too many people, too many cameras, somewhere neutral. She thought for a moment. The British Library. Reading rooms, 2 o'clock. Bring everything you have on the eggs, documentation, photos, stories, all of it. Adrian stood as well, and up close she could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Why are you doing this? Because someone should. Because you trusted me with something real. Because she hesitated, then decided honesty was the only option. Because I've spent my whole life being quiet and invisible and safe. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of watching from the sidelines. So maybe I'm doing this for you. Or maybe I'm doing it for me. Does it matter? It might. We'll figure it out by tomorrow at 2. Evelyn grabbed her notepad and pen. Your usual soup? The shift from personal to professional should have been jarring, but Adrian just nodded. My usual. She walked away before he could say anything else, before she could second-guess herself, before the reality of what she'd just offered to do could settle in and paralyze her. She was a waitress with an art history degree. She had no business experience, no connections, no reason to think she could help a billionaire save his empire from a corporate takeover. But she'd made the offer, and Adrian hadn't laughed at her. He'd looked at her like she might actually be serious, like she might actually be able to help. That would have to be enough. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Evelyn served tables, refilled drinks, cleared plates, smiled politely at customers who didn't know her name. But her mind was spinning with possibilities. The foundation could work. It had to work. Because the alternative was watching Adrian give up, watching Marcus Kane take everything, watching a good man get destroyed by grief and greed. When Adrian left that night, he didn't leave an egg. Instead, he left a business card with his personal number written on the back in sharp, precise handwriting. In case you change your mind, he said quietly, about tomorrow, about any of this. No judgment if you do. But Evelyn knew she wouldn't change her mind. For the first time in years, she felt like she was doing something that mattered, something real. She tucked the card into her pocket next to the blue egg and went back to work. Marcus cornered her during the end-of-shift cleanup. What are you doing? My job. Your job is serving food, not having lengthy conversations with emotionally unstable billionaires, not getting involved in their personal lives, not, he gestured helplessly, whatever this is. He requested me specifically. You said not to screw it up. I meant don't piss him off. I didn't mean become his therapist or his business partner or whatever you think you're doing. Marcus's expression was genuinely worried now, not just annoyed. Adrian Volkov is not a project you can fix, Evelyn. He's a powerful man with serious problems and enemies who would crush you without thinking twice. Stay in your lane. What if I don't want to stay in my lane? The question hung between them. Marcus stared at her like he'd never seen her before. You're serious? I am. You're going to get hurt or fired, probably both. Maybe. But at least I'll have tried. Evelyn untied her apron. I need tomorrow afternoon off, 2 to 5. Can you cover my shift? Absolutely not. We're fully booked. Please, Marcus. I've worked here for 3 months without missing a single day. I've covered for other people a dozen times. I'm asking for 1 afternoon. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. 1 afternoon, but if this blows up in your face, I'm not protecting you. Understand? Understood. She went home and didn't sleep. Instead, she pulled out every article she'd saved about Volkov Industries, about Marcus Kane, about corporate takeovers and foundation law, and how to build a charity from scratch. She had no idea what she was doing, but she had passion and research skills and a desperate need to prove, to Adrian, to herself, to everyone who'd ever dismissed her. That quiet didn't mean powerless. By the time dawn broke over London, Evelyn had filled 15 pages with notes. It wasn't a complete plan. It probably wasn't even a good plan. But it was something, a starting point, a way forward that didn't end with Adrian losing everything. She showed up at the British Library at 1:30, 30 minutes early, because her anxiety wouldn't let her be late. The reading rooms were quiet and sacred, the kind of space where people spoke in whispers and treated books like holy objects, perfect for a private conversation. Adrian arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. He looked different in daylight, older, more tired, but also more real somehow. Less like the untouchable billionaire from the restaurant, and more like a man who'd forgotten how to sleep. He sat down across from her without preamble. "I didn't think you'd actually come." "I said I would." "People say a lot of things." He pulled out a leather portfolio. "But here we are. So what's the plan?" Evelyn spread out her notes between them. "We turn your grief into purpose. Every egg becomes part of the foundation's story. We launch publicly in 10 days, right before the board meeting. We control the narrative instead of letting Cain control it." Adrian flipped through her notes, his expression unreadable. "You've been busy." "I don't sleep much." "Neither do I." He set the papers down. "This could work, maybe, but it's risky. If we announce a major foundation and it flops, Cain wins anyway. We need this to be perfect." "Nothing's perfect. But it can be good. It can be real." Evelyn pulled out her list. "I need everything. Every egg, every story, every detail about Natasha and Anna that you're willing to share publicly. We build a narrative around love and legacy and turning loss into opportunity for others. You want me to publicize my family's death? I want you to publicize your family's life, their dreams, their impact. Anna wanted to walk on Mars. We fund young astronomers. Natasha loved the arts. We support young dancers and musicians. We make their memory mean something beyond your private grief." Adrian's jaw clenched. "I don't want to exploit them." "You're not exploiting them. You're honoring them. There's a difference." Evelyn leaned forward. "Right now, the only public story about your family is the accident, the tragedy, the loss. We change that story. We make it about who they were and what they inspired." Silence. Adrian stared at the table, at her notes, at his own hands. Evelyn could see him fighting with himself, weighing the cost of making his private pain public against the cost of losing everything he'd built. "If I do this," he said finally, "there's no going back. The media will tear into every detail. They'll want to know everything about the accident, about Natasha, about Anna, about me. I won't have any privacy left." "You don't have privacy now. They're already writing about you, already speculating. At least this way you control what they know." "Control?" Adrian laughed bitterly. "I haven't controlled anything in 4 years." "Then start now." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Evelyn felt the weight of his assessment. She knew what he was seeing, a nobody waitress with big ideas and no experience, someone who had no business offering to help a billionaire fight a corporate war, someone who should probably stay in her lane like Marcus said. But she didn't look away. She met Adrian's eyes and let him see her determination, her desperation, her absolute refusal to back down. "Okay," he said quietly, "let's do it. Let's build your foundation. But if this doesn't work, if it doesn't work, we'll figure something else out. But it's going to work." Evelyn grabbed a pen. "Now start talking. Tell me about the first egg, the first memory. We're going to make the world understand what they meant to you." Adrian pulled out his phone and opened a photo album. Evelyn's breath caught. There were dozens of eggs displayed there, each one more beautiful than the last. Diamonds and rubies and emeralds and sapphires, all arranged in intricate patterns that told stories she was only beginning to understand. "This one," Adrian said, pointing to an egg covered in musical notes made from tiny black diamonds. "This was the first one I commissioned, 6 months after the accident. Natasha's favorite piece was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. She'd put it on and dance around our living room like she was still performing at the Royal Opera House." His voice cracked, but he kept going. "I couldn't listen to it for months after she died. It hurt too much. But then I heard it playing in a cafe somewhere, and instead of pain, I just felt her, like she was right there with me. So I had this egg made to capture that moment, the music, the memory,
the feeling of her dancing.
Evelyn started writing, her hand moving across the page almost faster than her brain could keep up. This was it. This was the story. Not just expensive trinkets left by a broken billionaire, but a love letter written in gold and jewels and precious memories. They worked for 3 hours straight, going through egg after egg. Adrian talked and Evelyn wrote, filling page after page with stories about a fierce ballet dancer and a brilliant little girl and a life that had been cut tragically short. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Evelyn realized that Adrian wasn't the only one being changed by this process. She was finding her voice, her purpose, the thing she'd been searching for her entire adult life without knowing what it was. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe she'd get hurt. Maybe this whole plan would collapse and she'd end up jobless and embarrassed and defeated. But at least she'd have tried. At least she'd have done something real. And that was worth the risk. The first sign that Marcus Kane knew about their plan came in the form of an article published 3 days later in the Financial Times. Evelyn was sitting in her apartment at 6 in the morning, running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee, when Adrian called. "Have you seen it?" No greeting. His voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "Seen what?" "Check your email. I'm sending you the link." Evelyn's laptop was already open, surrounded by printouts and notes and half-eaten takeout containers. She pulled up her email with shaking hands. The article loaded slowly, the headline appearing first in bold black letters. Volkov's Vanity Project, Billionaire's New Foundation, questioned by industry insiders. Her stomach dropped. The article was brutal. It quoted anonymous sources close to Volkov Industries, who claimed Adrian was planning to use company resources to fund a pet charity based on his emotional instability. Marcus Kane was quoted extensively, his concern practically dripping off the page. "We all sympathize with Adrian's loss," Kane had said, "but using shareholder money to process his grief publicly is exactly the kind of judgment lapse that concerns the board."
"How did he find out?" Evelyn's voice came out strangled. "We've been so careful. Someone talked, or someone saw us at the library, or Kane has people watching me 24/7, which honestly wouldn't surprise me at this point." Adrian's breathing was ragged over the phone. "Doesn't matter how. What matters is he's already spinning it against us, and we haven't even launched yet."
Evelyn scrolled through the article, her heart sinking with every paragraph. Kane had somehow gotten details. Not all of them accurate, but enough to make Adrian look unstable and impulsive. There were mentions of the eggs, framed as expensive trinkets rather than meaningful art. References to Adrian's nightly dinners portrayed as evidence of mental breakdown. Even the foundation itself was painted as a desperate attempt to rehabilitate his image rather than genuine philanthropy. "We need to move faster," she said, thinking out loud. "Launch sooner, before he can do more damage." "Launch with what? We don't have a board yet. We don't have tax documentation. We don't even have a proper mission statement." Adrian's voice cracked. "This was a mistake. I should have known Kane would be 10 steps ahead. He always is." "Stop." Evelyn stood up, pacing her tiny apartment. "Just stop." So Kane got ahead of the announcement. So what? We adjust, we pivot, we don't give up. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being publicly eviscerated. The words hit harder than they should have. Evelyn felt her temper flare, something that rarely happened, something she usually kept buried under layers of politeness and professionalism. "You're right. I'm not. I'm just the waitress who's been working 16-hour days for the past week trying to help you save your company. I'm just the nobody who's risking her job and her reputation to stand next to you while everyone assumes I'm either sleeping with you or using you for money. You're absolutely right. This is so much easier for me." Silence on the other end of the line, then quietly, "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be useful. We have 6 days until the board meeting. Kane just showed his hand early. That means he's nervous. That means he thinks we're actually a threat. Or it means he knows something we don't. Maybe both." Evelyn grabbed her notes, flipping through pages until she found what she was looking for. "Here's what we do. We call a press conference for tomorrow. We announce the foundation on our terms, not Kane's. We show the eggs. We tell the story. We make it impossible for him to paint this as vanity or instability. Tomorrow's too soon. Go. Tomorrow's perfect. It catches Kane off guard. It puts us back in control of the narrative, and it forces the board to see you as proactive instead of reactive. She was talking faster now, ideas coming together even as she spoke. You have the eggs. I have the stories. We have enough for a basic presentation. It won't be perfect, but perfect is the enemy of done. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, some of the defeat had left his voice. You sound different.
Different how? Like someone who's not afraid anymore. Or at least someone who's decided fear doesn't matter. Evelyn looked around her apartment, at the chaos of papers and research, at the life she'd built that was small and safe and utterly forgettable. Maybe I'm tired of being afraid. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible. Or maybe I just really hate Marcus Kane and want to watch him lose. Adrian laughed, and it was a real laugh this time, not bitter or broken. I'll call my PR team, set up the press conference for 2 p.m. tomorrow, my office building, main conference room. I'll be there. Evelyn? He hesitated. Thank you. For this. For believing in it even when I don't. You will. By tomorrow, you'll remember why you built this empire in the first place. Why you can't let someone like Kane tear it apart. She paused. And Adrian? Wear the navy suit. The one from the photo at the charity gala with Natasha. You looked human in that one, less like a corporate robot. That suit doesn't fit anymore. Then get it altered, tonight. You need to look like the man who built Volkov Industries, not the ghost who's been haunting it. She hung up before he could argue, before she could second-guess herself, before the reality of what they were about to attempt could paralyze her. A press conference. Tomorrow. In front of actual journalists who would ask actual questions she had no idea how to answer. Marcus was going to kill her. Assuming she didn't kill herself with stress first, Evelyn spent the rest of the day at the library, refining their presentation. She'd learned enough about Adrian's company over the past week to know that Volkov Industries wasn't just about profit. Adrian's father had started with nothing, a Russian immigrant who'd built a tech empire through relentless work and genuine innovation. Adrian had expanded it, yes, but he'd also maintained his father's commitment to employee welfare, environmental responsibility, ethical business practices. The kind of things that didn't make headlines but mattered to the 14,000 people who worked for him. Marcus Kane didn't care about any of that. Kane was a venture capitalist who specialized in hostile takeovers of underperforming companies. He'd buy them, strip out everything valuable, sell off the pieces, and walk away with millions while employees lost their jobs and communities lost their anchors. He'd done it a dozen times before. Volkov Industries was just his latest target. Evelyn couldn't let that happen, not just for Adrian, but for everyone who depended on his company staying whole. She showed up at Le Jardin Eternel that night for her shift with her resignation letter already written. Marcus took one look at her face and sighed. You're quitting. I need to focus on the foundation. I can't do both. You're going to regret this. When it all falls apart and you need your job back, I'm not guaranteeing it'll be here. But Marcus's expression was sad more than angry. You were a good server, Evelyn. Quiet. Reliable. I'm sorry you're throwing that away for a billionaire's midlife crisis. It's not a crisis, it's a choice. And I'm choosing to be part of something that matters instead of invisible in something that doesn't. She worked her last shift with a strange sense of finality. The regular customers didn't notice she was leaving. Why would they? She'd perfected the art of being unnoticed. But when 8 o'clock came and Adrian didn't walk through the door, she felt the absence like a physical thing. He was preparing for tomorrow, getting his suit altered, working with his PR team, doing all the things a CEO should do instead of having dinner with ghosts. Progress, she told herself. This was progress. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the main conference room of Volkov Industries headquarters. Evelyn arrived at noon, her hands shaking so badly she could barely sign in at the security desk. Adrian's assistant, a sharp woman named Patricia who looked like she could kill you with a spreadsheet, met her in the lobby. Mr. Volkov is in his office. He asked me to bring you up. Patricia's expression was professionally neutral, but Evelyn could feel the judgment radiating off her. The eggs are already set up in the conference room. Security team did a sweep. PR team is handling media credentials. We're expecting about 30 journalists. 30. Evelyn's stomach churned. She'd been imagining maybe 10 people in a small room. 30 was a crowd. 30 was real. Adrian's office was on the 40th floor, all glass and steel and views that made her dizzy.
He was standing by the window when she walked in, wearing the navy suit she'd suggested. Patricia was right. It had been altered. It fit perfectly now, making him look less like a grief-stricken widower and more like the ruthless businessman the financial papers wrote about. "You came." He turned to face her. "I wasn't sure you would." "Why wouldn't I?" "Because this is insane. Because you quit your job for a plan that might not work. Because you're about to stand in front of 30 journalists and defend a foundation that doesn't technically exist yet." Adrian crossed to his desk, picked up a folder. "I had legal draw up the paperwork last night. The Anna Volkov Foundation is officially registered as of 9 a.m. this morning. I seeded it with £50 million. Board of directors is you, me, and 3 people I trust completely. Mission statement focuses on supporting exceptional young people in science and arts." Evelyn took the folder with numb fingers. 50 million. It needs to be real. Kane will try to claim it's just for show, but 50 million is real money, real commitment. We're not playing anymore. "Adrian, I can't be on a board of directors. I don't know anything about—" "You know more than you think, and you're the only person who understands what we're actually trying to do here." He pulled out another folder. "This is yours. Background on everyone who'll be in that room. Journalists, their outlets, the kinds of questions they typically ask. Patricia compiled it this morning." Evelyn flipped through the dossier, her anxiety ratcheting higher with every page. Financial Times, The Guardian, Bloomberg, BBC. These weren't small publications. These were the people who could make or break them with a single article. "I'm going to mess this up," she said quietly. "I'm going to say something wrong or freeze up or—" "You're going to be fine. Better than fine, because you actually believe in this." Adrian moved closer, his expression intense. "Do you know how rare that is? People who actually care about something beyond profit or status? I'd forgotten what it looked like until I met you." "I'm terrified." "Good. Fear means you understand the stakes." He glanced at his watch. 1 hour. Let's go over the presentation one more time. Make sure we're telling the same story." They spent the next 45 minutes in Adrian's office, rehearsing. He'd talk about his family, about the inspiration behind the foundation. Evelyn would explain the artistic and historical significance of the eggs, the symbolism behind each piece. Together, they'd present a narrative of love transformed into legacy, of personal loss becoming public good. It sounded almost believable when they practiced it. The conference room was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Thames, a massive table that had been cleared to display the eggs. 63 of them, arranged in careful rows, each one glittering under professional lighting. Cameras were already set up. Journalists were filing in, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to barely concealed hostility. Evelyn recognized several faces from the dossier Patricia had prepared. Sarah Chen from Bloomberg, known for her aggressive questioning. James Whitmore from The Guardian, who'd written 3 separate articles about Adrian's concerning behavior. Maria Santos from the Financial Times, who'd broken the story about the foundation this morning. And there, in the back row, was Marcus Kane himself. He'd shown up. Of course he had. Looking smug and confident in an expensive suit, flanked by 2 lawyers and a PR person Evelyn recognized from her research. Adrian saw him too. His whole body went rigid. He wasn't on the press list. "He's making a statement, showing he's not worried." Evelyn touched his arm lightly. "Ignore him. Focus on everyone else." Patricia called for attention. The room quieted. Adrian stepped up to the podium, and Evelyn moved to stand beside the egg display, trying to look confident instead of terrified. "Thank you for coming," Adrian began. His voice was steady, professional. 4 years ago, I lost my wife Natasha and my daughter Anna in a car accident. What I'm about to share with you is deeply personal, but I believe it's important." He paused, letting the weight of that statement settle over the room. Several journalists shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the corporate announcement they'd been expecting. After they died, I didn't know how to grieve, how to process that kind of loss while still running a company that employed thousands of people. So I created a ritual. Every night, I had dinner at their favorite restaurant, and I brought with me small works of art, Fabergé-style eggs, each one representing a specific memory of my family. Adrian gestured to the display behind him. "These eggs aren't just expensive trinkets. They're a language,
a way of keeping Natasha and Anna alive through symbolism and craft. Each one tells a story, and together they represent everything my daughter dreamed of becoming and everything my wife believed in. He nodded to Evelyn. This was her cue. She stepped forward, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The tradition of Fabergé eggs dates back to 1885, when Peter Carl Fabergé created the first imperial Easter egg for Tsar Alexander III. Each egg was meant to surprise and delight, yes, but also to commemorate, to preserve important moments in a form that would last. Her voice was shaking, but she pushed through. Adrian has done the same thing. This egg, she picked up the blue one, the first one he'd given her, represents Polaris, the North Star. Anna was obsessed with astronomy. She wanted to be the first person to walk on Mars. This egg is both a memorial to that dream and a reminder that even when we lose our guiding stars, we can still find our way. She moved to the green egg. This one represents birch trees. Natasha grew up in Russia near a birch forest. She had them planted around their home in Surrey because she wanted Anna to experience the same magic she had as a child. It's a symbol of roots, of heritage, of the connections that survive even after death. Evelyn went through 6 more eggs, explaining the symbolism, the craftsmanship, the memories they contained. And slowly, she felt the energy in the room shift. The journalists were actually listening. Some were taking notes. A few looked genuinely moved. Then Sarah Chen raised her hand. This is a beautiful story, but how does it justify using corporate resources for what amounts to a personal memorial? There it was. The question they'd been expecting. Adrian started to answer, but Evelyn spoke first. The Anna Volkov Foundation isn't using corporate resources. It's been seeded with £50 million from Adrian's personal fortune. Volkov Industries may partner with the foundation on specific initiatives, but the foundation itself is completely separate. She met Chen's eyes steadily. And it's not a memorial, it's a commitment. Anna wanted to explore space. The foundation will fund scholarships for exceptional students in physics and astronomy. Natasha believed in the transformative power of art. The foundation will support young dancers and musicians who lack resources but not talent. Convenient timing, though, James Whitmore called out. Hostile takeover in progress, board meeting in 5 days, and suddenly you announce a major charitable initiative. Seems like reputation management more than genuine philanthropy. Adrian's jaw clenched, but his voice stayed level. The timing is deliberate, yes, because Marcus Kane has been using my grief as a weapon against me and against this company. He's claimed my nightly dinners are evidence of mental instability, that my emotional state makes me unfit to lead. But what I've been doing isn't instability. It's processing loss in a way that honors the people I lost while building something meaningful for others. He leaned forward, hands gripping the podium. Kane wants to paint me as broken, unstable, someone who should step aside so he can take over and maximize shareholder value by any means necessary. But I'm not broken. I'm grieving. And those two things aren't the same. So this is about the takeover. Maria Santos's voice cut through the murmur that followed Adrian's statement. You're using a dead child to fight a corporate battle. The room went silent. Evelyn felt rage rise up in her chest, hot and immediate. Before Adrian could respond, she stepped forward. No. Marcus Kane is using a dead child to justify a corporate raid. He's the one who's been leaking information about Adrian's private grief to the media. He's the one who's been painting normal human emotion as professional incompetence. He's the one who's turned a tragedy into ammunition. Her voice was shaking with anger now, all her careful composure cracking. Adrian loved his family. He lost them. And instead of hiding that loss or pretending it didn't happen, he created something beautiful to remember them by. If that makes him unfit to run a company, then maybe the problem isn't with him. Maybe the problem is with a business culture that treats humanity as weakness. The journalists were staring at her. So was Adrian. So was Marcus Kane, his expression dark with fury. Who are you exactly? Whitmore asked. I've seen you listed as a board member, but there's no background information. I'm nobody important, Evelyn said before she could stop herself. I'm an art history graduate who was working as a waitress until 3 days ago. I have no business experience, no connections, no reason anyone should listen to me. But I understand what these eggs mean, and I understand that reducing a man to his worst moment is exactly what's wrong with how we treat people who dare to be publicly human. Sarah Chen was writing furiously. Others had phones out, recording.
This was going to be everywhere by tonight. Evelyn Hart, the mysterious waitress defending a billionaire. The optics were terrible, but she couldn't stop now. The Anna Volkov Foundation is real, she continued. 50 million pounds real. Board members real. Mission statement real. We're launching scholarship programs next month. We're partnering with schools and arts organizations. We're doing exactly what we said we'd do, turning private grief into public good. And if that's not enough to prove Adrian's fitness to lead, then I don't know what would be. Marcus Kane stood up. May I say something? Adrian's expression was cold. No. I think the press deserves to hear both sides. This is my press conference, in my building, about my foundation. You weren't invited. Adrian's voice could have frozen water. If you have something to say, you can call your own press conference, but you don't get to hijack this one. Kane smiled, but it was all teeth and no warmth. Of course, my apologies for the intrusion. I'll let you continue your, he paused deliberately, presentation. He walked out, followed by his entourage. But the damage was done. His presence had been the point, a reminder that he was watching, that he wasn't intimidated. The rest of the press conference went smoother, but Evelyn barely registered it. She answered questions on autopilot, her brain still replaying her outburst. She'd lost her temper. In front of 30 journalists, she'd called herself a nobody. She'd probably just made everything worse. When it was finally over, when the last journalist had filed out and the cameras were being packed up, Patricia approached Adrian. That went well, she said, which was such obvious sarcasm that Evelyn almost laughed. Chen from Bloomberg wants a follow-up interview. Whitmore is already working on a profile piece, and someone from the BBC called about a television appearance. Decline all of it. Adrian was staring at the eggs, his expression unreadable. No more interviews until after the board meeting. Understood. Patricia glanced at Evelyn. Miss Hart, there's a car waiting to take you home. Mr. Volkov will be in meetings for the rest of the afternoon. It was a dismissal. Evelyn gathered her things, trying not to feel hurt. What had she expected? That Adrian would thank her for losing her temper and potentially making everything worse? She was halfway to the elevator when Adrian caught up to her. Wait. She turned. He looked exhausted, like the press conference had taken everything he had left. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Defend me like that. Call out Kane. You could have stayed quiet and let me handle it. I know. But you didn't. You got angry. You spoke up. He shook his head. You made it real. All of it. The foundation, the mission, everything we've been working toward. You made it real. Or I made it worse. I called myself a nobody in front of Bloomberg. You called yourself human in a room full of people who've forgotten what that looks like. Adrian stepped closer. The board meeting is in 5 days. Win or lose, this ends then. And if we lose, if Kane takes over and tears apart everything my father built, at least we tried. At least we fought back. We're not going to lose. You don't know that. No, but I believe it. And that has to count for something. Evelyn hesitated, then asked the question that had been bothering her since Kane walked out. What does he know that we don't? He looked too confident, like he's still holding cards we haven't seen. Adrian's expression darkened. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. That night, Evelyn's phone exploded with notifications. The articles were already live. Bloomberg. Volkov's mysterious waitress defends grief-driven foundation. The Guardian. From restaurant to boardroom, the unlikely alliance fighting a corporate takeover. Financial Times. Anna Volkov Foundation launches amid questions about timing and motivation. The comments were brutal. People called her a gold digger, a fame seeker, someone using a grieving billionaire for personal gain. Others defended her, calling her brave for speaking up. The discourse was vicious and immediate and completely overwhelming. Marcus from the restaurant sent her a text. Saw the press conference. You were right to quit. Good luck with whatever comes next. Her mother called from Brighton, confused and worried after seeing her daughter's face on the BBC website. Evelyn spent an hour trying to explain what she'd gotten herself into, hearing her own doubts reflected back in her mother's concerned questions. By midnight, she was exhausted and wired and terrified that she'd ruined everything. She pulled up the articles again, rereading them with fresh eyes. Most were neutral, some were sympathetic, a few were outright hostile. But underneath all of them, in the comments and the social media responses, something else was happening. People were sharing their own stories of grief, of loss, of trying to balance personal pain with professional responsibilities, of being told to get over it, move on, stop being so emotional. Adrian's story had touched something raw, and Evelyn's defense of it, messy and imperfect as it was, had given people permission to talk about their own experiences. Maybe that was worth something. Maybe that was enough. Her phone rang at 2 a.m. Adrian. Did I wake you? I wasn't sleeping. Neither was I. I've been reading the coverage. Evelyn, he paused. Thank you. For today. For everything. I know I haven't said it enough. You don't need to thank me. We're in this together. Are we? Because from where I'm sitting, you've sacrificed your job and your privacy and possibly your reputation for a cause that might be doomed from the start. Then I guess we better make sure it's not doomed. Evelyn sat up in bed, fully awake now. What did you find out about Kane? What's he hiding? I don't know yet, but I have people looking into his financing for the takeover, where the money's coming from, who his backers are. If we can expose any irregularities, that's corporate warfare. That's not our fight. It is now. Kane made it our fight when he crashed the press conference, when he tried to paint the foundation as vanity instead of purpose. Adrian's voice was hard. I let him use my grief against me for months. I'm not doing it anymore. We launched the foundation properly. We show the board real programs with real impact, and we find out what Kane's really after. 5 days. 5 days, Adrian agreed. Think we can save an empire in 5 days? We saved it today. Everything after this is just details. She heard him laugh, tired but genuine. You're either delusional or brilliant. I haven't decided which. Maybe both. Now go to sleep. Tomorrow we start building something Kane can't tear down. But sleep didn't come easily for either of them, because they both knew Marcus Kane wasn't done. And whatever he was planning, it was going to hurt. The call came at 7 in the morning, 3 days before the board meeting. Evelyn was in Adrian's office, had basically been living there since the press conference, surrounded by scholarship applications and partnership proposals when Patricia burst through the door without knocking. We have a problem. Adrian looked up from his laptop, already reaching for his coffee like he'd need the caffeine for whatever was coming. What kind of problem? The kind where 3 major investors just pulled their backing, simultaneously, at exactly 6 a.m. Patricia's face was pale. That's 18% of our shareholder base gone in one coordinated move. The coffee cup stopped halfway to Adrian's mouth. That's not possible. Those investors have been with us for years. They're locked in until someone triggers the instability clause in their contracts, which apparently Kane's legal team found a way to do. Patricia thrust a tablet at him. They're claiming the foundation announcement constitutes a material change in company direction without board approval. They're exercising their right to exit. Evelyn watched the color drain from Adrian's face as he read. She didn't need to understand all the legal jargon to know this was bad, really bad. How much does this hurt us? She asked quietly. It gives Kane the ammunition he needs to claim the company is in freefall under my leadership. Stock price is already dropping, down 4% in the last hour. Adrian set the tablet down carefully, like he was worried he might throw it otherwise. The board meeting is in 3 days. This just handed him exactly what he needed to push them toward a takeover. So we fight back. We show the other investors. There's more. Patricia's voice was tight. The Times is running a story this afternoon. Anonymous sources claiming you and Adrian are romantically involved, that the foundation is a cover for embezzlement, that you're manipulating a grieving man for personal gain. Evelyn felt like she'd been punched. That's insane. We're not... Doesn't matter if it's true, it's a story, and stories like that stick. Adrian stood up, started pacing. This is Kane. Has to be. He's hitting us from every angle at once. Financial, personal, legal. He wants us too scattered to mount a proper defense. Then we don't scatter. Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. We stay focused. The board meeting is what matters. Everything else is just noise. Noise that's destroying my company's stock price and your reputation simultaneously. Adrian stopped pacing, turned to look at her. You should walk away before this gets worse. Issue a statement saying you were misled, that you're stepping down from the foundation board, No. Evelyn, no, I'm not walking away. I'm not giving Kane what he wants, which is you isolated and defenseless. She stood up, moved to face him directly. You said we were in this together. Did you mean it or not? Adrian's jaw clenched. Of course I meant it, but I didn't sign up to watch you get destroyed alongside me. Well, tough, because I did sign up for exactly that. Evelyn grabbed her laptop. Now stop spiraling and help me figure out how to counter this. We have 3 days. What do we need to make the board choose you over Kane? Patricia cleared her throat. You need proof that the foundation is legitimate and that the company's fundamentals are strong despite the stock drop. You need at least 6 board members voting in your favor out of 11 total. And you need to neutralize whatever else Kane's planning to throw at you before Thursday. Great. Simple. Evelyn pulled up her notes. The foundation has $50 million in funding, a mission statement, and partnership agreements with 3 major universities for scholarship programs. That's legitimate. The company's fundamentals. Adrian, what are we working with? He moved back to his desk, fingers flying across the keyboard. Revenue's actually up 8% year over year. We closed 2 major contracts in the last quarter. Employee retention is at 94%, which is nearly unheard of in our sector. The stock drop is artificial panic, not actual performance issues. So we present that. Hard numbers, concrete achievements, proof that your grief hasn't made you incompetent, just human. Evelyn was writing fast now, ideas coming together. What about the board votes? Who's definitely with you? Who's definitely with Kane? Adrian pulled up a list. David Chen and Sarah Williams are solid. They've been with my father since the beginning. Marcus Kane has his own vote, plus he's been courting James Fletcher and Rebecca Morrison. Both of them are new money, more interested in quick returns than long-term stability. That's 4 votes split. The remaining 7 are question marks. Then we need to flip at least 4 of those 7, or get 2 of Kane's people to switch sides. Evelyn studied the names. What do they care about? What motivates them? Money, mostly, status. Some of them genuinely believe in ethical business practices, but not enough to risk their portfolios for it. So we make it about money. We show them that Kane's takeover would gut the company's value long-term, even if it provides short-term gains. We show them that keeping you means stability and growth, while Kane means slash-and-burn asset stripping. Patricia nodded slowly. That could work, but you'd need concrete projections, analysis showing Kane's typical pattern of takeovers and how they've impacted other companies. Hard data that can't be disputed. I can get that. Evelyn was already opening new browser tabs. Kane's done this before. There's a pattern. We just need to make it visible. She spent the next 6 hours buried in research while Adrian handled emergency calls with investors and Patricia coordinated damage control with their PR team. By 2 p.m., when the Times article went live, Evelyn had compiled a comprehensive breakdown of every company Marcus Kane had acquired in the last decade. The pattern was clear and brutal. Kane would identify a company with solid fundamentals but temporary instability, usually due to leadership transition, personal crisis, or market fluctuation. He'd launch a hostile takeover, promising to restore stability and maximize value. Then once he had control, he'd immediately start cutting costs. First the research and development budgets, then employee benefits, then entire divisions that weren't immediately profitable. He'd sell off real estate, liquidate long-term investments, squeeze every penny of short-term value out of the company until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. Then he'd sell it for parts and walk away with massive profits while thousands of employees lost their jobs. This is what he does, Evelyn said, spreading out the research across Adrian's conference table. This is his business model, and Volkov Industries is next unless we stop him. Adrian studied the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. Some of these companies don't exist anymore. He literally killed them. Exactly. And we're going to make sure every board member sees this before Thursday. We're going to make them choose between long-term stability under your leadership or short-term profit followed by complete destruction under Kane's. They might choose destruction if the profit's high enough. Then we make sure they understand what they're choosing. We put faces to the numbers. We show them the 14,000 employees who'll lose their jobs, the communities that'll lose their economic anchors, the innovation that'll die because Kane doesn't invest in anything that doesn't return immediate profit. Evelyn's voice was hard now. We make them feel the weight of their decision. Patricia stuck her head in. The Times article is worse than we thought. They've got photos of you two leaving the building together.
Quotes from concerned employees about Adrian's judgment, and they're speculating about where the foundation's $50 million actually came from. Evelyn pulled up the article on her phone. The headline made her stomach turn. Billionaire's new romance, waitress turned board member raises ethics questions. The piece was a hatchet job. Every interaction between her and Adrian reframed as evidence of impropriety. Her rapid elevation from waitress to foundation board member painted as suspicious. The foundation itself questioned as a possible money laundering scheme. Anonymous sources claimed Adrian was being manipulated by a woman who saw an opportunity to exploit a grieving man. "This is character assassination," she said quietly. "They're not even pretending to be objective. Kane owns the journalist who wrote this. Not literally, but she's done hit pieces for him before. This is his playbook. Destroy credibility before the fight even starts." Adrian's hands were shaking with barely controlled rage. "I'm calling our lawyers. This is libel. We can sue." "Lawsuits take months. We have days." Evelyn forced herself to think past the anger and humiliation. "We can't fight this story directly, but we can overwhelm it with a better one." "What better story? That you're not sleeping with me for money? That sounds exactly like something someone sleeping with me for money would say." "No. The story that the foundation is already making a difference. That we're not talking about future plans, we're delivering present results." She grabbed her phone, started making calls. "We have scholarship agreements in principle with 3 universities, right? Let's formalize them. Today. Get signatures, get student names. Make this real enough that the narrative has to shift from, 'Is this legitimate?' to 'Look what they've already accomplished.'" Patricia's eyes lit up. That could work. If we can show actual students receiving actual scholarships by Wednesday, it becomes much harder to claim the foundation is fake. Exactly. So who do we call? Who makes this happen? The next 36 hours blurred together. Evelyn barely slept, running on coffee and adrenaline and sheer stubbornness. She coordinated with university administrators, reviewed scholarship applications, helped draft press releases. Adrian handled the financial side while Patricia managed logistics and damage control. By Tuesday evening, they had it. 10 students, 5 in astrophysics and astronomy, 5 in performing arts, receiving full scholarships funded by the Anna Volkov Foundation. Real students with real stories, some of them from backgrounds so similar to Anna's and Natasha's that Evelyn found herself tearing up reading their applications. There was Maya Chen, 17, daughter of immigrants, who taught herself calculus watching YouTube videos because her school couldn't afford advanced math classes. Her essay about wanting to study exoplanet atmospheres was so passionate it hurt to read. There was James Morrison, 19, who'd been homeless for 6 months but kept dancing because it was the only thing that made sense when everything else was chaos. His audition tape showed raw talent that professional training could transform into something extraordinary. Each student represented exactly what the foundation was meant to do: find exceptional young people who had passion and ability but lacked resources, and give them the chance to become whoever they were meant to be. "This is real," Evelyn said to Adrian as they reviewed the final list Tuesday night. "This is actually real. We're changing these kids' lives. We're trying to save my company. These scholarships are a tactic." "No," she cut him off. "They were a tactic, but now they're real people with real dreams. That matters. That has to matter." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. It does matter. And Natasha would have loved this. She always said wealth was wasted on people who just used it to make more wealth. That the point of having money was using it to help people who actually needed it. Anna would be proud too. 10 students studying the stars because of her. That's legacy. If we survive Thursday, we'll expand it. 100 students, 1,000. We'll make the foundation everything it should be." Adrian's expression hardened. "But first we have to survive Thursday. And I just got word that Kane's calling in favors. He's got at least 5 board votes locked in. We need 6 to win. Then we flip someone. Or we find something on Kane that makes him toxic to associate with. I've had investigators looking into his finances for days. Everything's clean. Or clean enough that we can't prove otherwise before the meeting." Evelyn rubbed her eyes, exhaustion catching up with her. There has to be something. Some weakness, some pressure point we're missing. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "You're asking the wrong questions about Kane. Look at where his money actually comes from, who his silent partners are." "A friend." She showed Adrian. His expression went cold.
That's from inside my company. Someone's leaking information. Or someone's trying to help. Evelyn forwarded the text to her laptop, started searching. Kane's financing for the takeover. You said you were looking into it. What did you find? Shell companies, offshore accounts. Nothing illegal, but nothing transparent either. He's hiding his backers, which isn't unusual for this kind of deal. But if his backers are questionable, if they're people or organizations the board wouldn't want associated with Volkov Industries, that could change everything. Adrian pulled up his files. My investigators traced some of the money to a private equity firm in the Cayman Islands. That firm has connections to... He stopped, eyes widening. Oh, that's interesting. What? That firm is owned by a Russian oligarch who's currently under investigation for money laundering. If Kane's takeover is being funded by dirty money, the board can't approve it. It would expose the entire company to legal liability. Evelyn felt hope flare for the first time in days. Can you prove it? Before Thursday? Maybe. If I can get access to Kane's full financial records, which I can't legally do without a warrant or a very good hacker. Then get a hacker, or find someone who can get a warrant, or... She stopped. Wait, Kane crashed our press conference. He wasn't invited, but he showed up anyway, which means someone told him about it. Someone inside your PR team or your executive office. Adrian's expression went deadly quiet. You think we have a mole? I think Kane's been one step ahead of us this entire time because someone's feeding him information. And if someone's feeding him information, they might also have access to things he's shared with them. Things we could use. That's a dangerous game. If we're wrong, if we accuse someone without proof, then we're no worse off than we are now. But if we're right, we might find exactly what we need to destroy his credibility before the vote. Patricia appeared in the doorway, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. We have another problem. Kane just filed an emergency motion with the board requesting that Adrian recuse himself from Thursday's vote due to conflict of interest. He's claiming the foundation announcement proves Adrian's no longer acting in the company's best interests. He can't do that. I'm the CEO. He can request it. The board can vote on whether to grant the request. If they do, you don't get a say in your own fate. Patricia's voice was bleak. This keeps getting worse. Evelyn stood up, started pacing. Her mind was racing, trying to connect dots, trying to see the pattern Kane was creating. He was isolating Adrian, cutting off every avenue of defense, forcing the board to choose between a CEO who seemed unstable and a takeover artist who promised stability. He's going to win, Adrian said quietly. I can feel it. He's planned this too well. Every move we make, he's already 3 steps ahead. Every defense we mount, he's already prepared a counter. This was never a fair fight. Then we stopped fighting fair. Adrian and Patricia both looked at her. Evelyn felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. The same feeling she'd had before the press conference, before she'd quit her job, before she'd decided that being invisible was worse than being vulnerable. Kane's been operating under the assumption that we'll play by the rules, that we'll be careful and professional and appropriate. But he's not playing by the rules. He's lying to the press. He's coordinating investor exits. He's possibly financing this takeover with illegal money. So why are we limiting ourselves to proper procedure? What are you suggesting? Adrian's voice was careful. I'm suggesting we expose everything, not just at the board meeting, but publicly. We take every piece of dirt we have on Kane, his pattern of destroying companies, his questionable financing, his manipulation of the media, and we make it front-page news before the board even votes. We make it so toxic for them to side with him that they have no choice but to back you. That's nuclear. If we're wrong about any of it, we're liable for defamation. It could destroy what's left of the company's reputation. And if we do nothing, Kane wins anyway. At least this way we're fighting. Evelyn pulled up her research. I have documentation of every company he's gutted. You have evidence of questionable financing. We have a foundation that's already helping real students. We have a story that's compelling and true and shows you as someone who's grieving but purposeful instead of broken and incompetent. We use all of it. Patricia was shaking her head. This is incredibly risky. You're talking about a media blitz 48 hours before a critical board vote. If it backfires, it won't backfire if we're telling the truth. And we are. Everything we'd be saying is documented and provable. Evelyn looked at Adrian. But it's your company, your decision. I'm just the waitress who got in over her head. Adrian stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. A real smile.
tired but genuine. You're not just anything. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. And you might be right. Kane's been writing the narrative this entire time. Maybe it's time we took it back.
He grabbed his phone. Patricia, I need every journalist who covered the press conference on a call in 1 hour. Tell them we have breaking news about Marcus Kane and his takeover attempt. Make it sound urgent and exclusive. Evelyn, send me everything you've compiled on Kane's history. Every company, every pattern, every detail. We're building a case and we're making it public. This could end your career, Patricia warned. If the board sees this as a desperate smear campaign, my career is already ending if I do nothing. At least this way I go down fighting. Adrian's voice was hard, determined. And if we're lucky, we take Kane down with us. The next 12 hours were chaos. Phone calls with journalists, emergency meetings with lawyers to make sure nothing they said crossed into actual libel. Press releases drafted and redrafted and argued over until every word was legally defensible but still damning. By Wednesday morning, the story was everywhere. Bloomberg ran it first. Marcus Kane's takeover funded by sanctioned Russian oligarch, documents suggest. The Guardian followed with a comprehensive look at Kane's history of corporate destruction. The Financial Times published an analysis showing that companies under Kane's control lost an average of 60% of their workforce within 2 years. The documentation was all there. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the connections to questionable money sources, the pattern of acquisitions followed by systematic destruction. Everything laid out in careful, factual detail that couldn't be dismissed as rumor or speculation. Kane's response was immediate and furious. He issued a statement calling the allegations baseless and defamatory. He threatened lawsuits. He went on CNBC to defend his record and attack Adrian's judgment. But the damage was done. By Wednesday afternoon, 3 of the board members Kane had been courting publicly distanced themselves from his takeover attempt. The stock price stabilized. Investors who'd been panicking started calling Adrian's office to express support. "It's working," Patricia said, sounding shocked. "The narrative's shifting. People are actually listening." Evelyn allowed herself a moment of hope. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Hart? This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you about your involvement with the Anna Volkov Foundation and allegations of embezzlement." The hope died instantly. "What? There's no embezzlement. The foundation is completely legitimate. We've received complaints suggesting otherwise. I'm going to need you to come to the station for questioning. Today, if possible." Evelyn looked at Adrian, her heart sinking. "Kane's not done. He's coming after me now." The detective was polite but firm. Evelyn spent 3 hours at the police station, answering questions about the foundation's finances, her relationship with Adrian, how she'd gone from waitress to board member so quickly. She had answers for everything because everything was legitimate and documented. But she could see how it looked from the outside. Suspicious timing, rapid elevation, a powerful man and a woman who appeared out of nowhere. By the time she left the station, it was 7 p.m. The board meeting was in less than 15 hours, and she was exhausted and scared and starting to doubt whether any of this had been worth it. Adrian was waiting outside in his car. He looked wrecked. "They questioned you for 3 hours," he said as she got in. "That's not normal for a preliminary inquiry. Kane must have fed them something substantial enough to trigger an actual investigation. He's trying to make me toxic. If I'm under investigation for embezzlement, the board won't want me anywhere near the foundation. And if the foundation's legitimacy is questioned, your judgment is questioned. And Kane wins." Adrian hit the steering wheel. "I'm sorry. I should have seen this coming. Should have protected you better. You can't protect me from someone willing to lie to the police. Kane's desperate. That means we're close." Evelyn pulled out her phone. The detective asked about specific transactions. Someone gave her dates and amounts to look at, which means someone's been monitoring the foundation's accounts. The mole. Has to be. And if we can figure out who it is, we're out of time. The meeting's tomorrow morning. Even if we find proof of a mole, what does that change? Evelyn stared out the window at London passing by in the dark. "I don't know, but we can't give up now, not after everything." Her phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number. "The mole is Rebecca Morrison. Check her financial records. You're welcome." She showed Adrian. His face went pale. "Rebecca's on the board, and she's Morrison's sister. If she's feeding information to Kane, then we have our proof that Kane's been cheating this entire time. that nothing about this takeover has been legitimate. But Rebecca's voting tomorrow. If we accuse her without absolute proof, she'll deny it and we'll look paranoid. Then we get absolute proof. Tonight. However we have to. Evelyn's voice was steady, despite the fear churning in her gut. You said you'd go down fighting. Did you mean it? Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he made a call. Patricia, I need you to access Rebecca Morrison's company email and financial records. I don't care if it's technically illegal. I need it in the next 2 hours. Patricia's response was inaudible, but clearly shocked. I know what I'm asking, Adrian said, and I'll take full responsibility if there are consequences. But if we're right, if Rebecca's been selling us out to Kane, we need proof before the vote tomorrow. Can you do it or not? A pause. Then Adrian nodded. Thank you. Send everything you find directly to me. And Patricia? After tomorrow, regardless of how this ends, you're getting a raise, or the best reference letter I can write if there's no company left to work for. He hung up, looked at Evelyn. We just crossed a line. If this doesn't work, I could face criminal charges for corporate espionage. If this doesn't work, Kane destroys your company and you lose everything anyway. At least this way we tried. They drove to Adrian's office in silence. Evelyn's mind was spinning through scenarios, trying to anticipate what Kane would throw at them next. He'd played this perfectly so far. Every move calculated, every attack precisely timed. He wouldn't have come this far just to lose in the final round. Patricia was waiting when they arrived, looking terrified and determined in equal measure. I got into Rebecca's accounts. You're going to want to see this. She pulled up email chains on the conference room screen. Messages between Rebecca Morrison and Marcus Kane going back 6 months. Plans for the takeover, discussions of how to undermine Adrian's credibility. Specifics about the press conference, the foundation announcement, even the timing of investor exits. And there, in an email from 2 weeks ago, Rebecca had written, "The waitress is becoming a problem. Can you neutralize her? Maybe anonymous tip to financial crimes about embezzlement?" Evelyn felt sick. She set me up. The police investigation, that was her idea. Working with Kane, Adrian's voice was ice. She's been sabotaging us from inside the board this entire time. This is enough, Patricia said. This proves Kane's takeover was based on fraud and insider manipulation. The board has to reject it now. But Evelyn was looking at the most recent email, sent just 3 hours ago. Look at this. Rebecca telling Kane that the media campaign worked, that 3 board members dropped their support. She says they need a backup plan. Adrian read the email. His expression went dark. The backup plan is to claim I'm mentally unfit. Force a competency evaluation. Even if the takeover fails, if they can get me removed as CEO for mental health reasons, Kane can position himself as interim replacement. Can they actually do that? With enough board support, yes. It's a nuclear option, but if Kane's desperate enough... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. They had proof of Rebecca's betrayal. They had evidence of Kane's shady financing. They had a foundation that was real and already making a difference. But Kane still had one final card to play, removing Adrian entirely on the grounds that he was too unstable to lead. And after months of public grief, after the strange dinners and the eggs and the emotional press conferences, maybe the board would believe it. Maybe they'd decide that protecting shareholder value meant protecting shareholders from a CEO who couldn't separate personal trauma from professional judgment. We show this to the board, Evelyn said firmly. First thing tomorrow, before Kane can say anything. We expose Rebecca and we force the board to see that everything Kane's done has been built on lies and manipulation. And if they still vote for him anyway, then at least we'll know we fought as hard as we could. She met Adrian's eyes. You asked me once why I was doing this, why I was risking everything for your company, and I said maybe I was tired of being invisible. But that's not the whole truth. What's the whole truth? I'm doing this because you reminded me that it's okay to be human, that grief doesn't have to be hidden, that loving people and losing them doesn't make you weak or broken. And if the board can't see that, if they choose profit over humanity, then they don't deserve the company your father built. Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. Thank you for everything, for believing in this when I couldn't, for fighting battles you had no obligation to fight, Don't. Evelyn squeezed his hand. We're not done yet. Thank me when we win. And if we lose, then thank me for trying. They worked through the night, preparing their presentation for the board. Every piece of evidence carefully organized, every argument precisely worded. By 6 a.m., they were as ready as they'd ever be. The board meeting was scheduled for 9. At 8:30, Evelyn stood in the bathroom of Volkov Industries headquarters, staring at her reflection. She looked terrible, exhausted, wired, running on no sleep and too much coffee. But her eyes were clear, determined. She'd come so far from the invisible waitress who'd been too scared to use her voice. And regardless of what happened in the next few hours, she'd never be that person again. Adrian knocked on the door. "It's time." Evelyn took one last breath, smoothed down her borrowed suit, and walked out to face whatever came next. The boardroom was exactly as intimidating as Evelyn had imagined. Massive windows overlooking the Thames, a table that could seat 20 but held 11 board members who collectively controlled billions in assets, crystal water glasses catching the morning light, everything expensive and pristine and designed to make you feel small. Marcus Kane was already there, seated at the far end like he owned the place. His lawyers flanked him, stone-faced and carrying briefcases that probably cost more than Evelyn's entire wardrobe. Rebecca Morrison sat 2 seats away, her expression carefully neutral. She didn't look at Adrian or Evelyn when they entered. David Chen and Sarah Williams, Adrian's allies, nodded in greeting. The other 6 board members looked uncomfortable, like they'd rather be anywhere else. Evelyn didn't blame them. This meeting was going to be ugly. Adrian took his seat at the head of the table. Evelyn sat beside him, acutely aware that she had no official reason to be here except that Adrian had insisted. Patricia sat behind them with a laptop, ready to pull up documents on command. "Shall we begin?" This board chairman, an elderly man named Thomas Wakefield, looked like he hadn't slept well either. "We're here to vote on Marcus Kane's proposal for acquisition of controlling shares in Volkov Industries. Mr. Kane, you have the floor." Kane stood smoothly. He was good at this, confident, polished, every word carefully chosen. "Thank you, Thomas. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'll be brief. Over the past 6 months, we've watched Adrian Volkov struggle to maintain focus and leadership in the wake of personal tragedy. I have tremendous sympathy for his loss. We all do. But sympathy doesn't protect shareholder value." He clicked a remote. A presentation appeared on the screen behind him. Charts showing stock volatility, articles about Adrian's nightly dinners, the press conference photo of Evelyn and Adrian that made them look far more intimate than they'd ever been. Adrian's recent behavior, the foundation announcement, the media campaign against me, the promotion of an unqualified romantic partner to the board, all of it demonstrates compromised judgment. The company needs stable leadership. I'm prepared to provide that leadership while ensuring Adrian receives the support and treatment he clearly needs. The words were careful, clinical, but the message was clear. Adrian was crazy and needed to be removed for everyone's good. Evelyn felt Adrian tense beside her. She put a hand on his arm under the table, a silent reminder to stay calm. They'd prepared for this. They knew what Kane would say. "I'm offering fair market value for controlling shares," Kane continued. "My financing is solid. My track record speaks for itself. The choice is simple. Continue on the current unstable path or embrace a future of strategic growth under proven leadership." He sat down. Several board members were nodding. Rebecca Morrison looked satisfied. This was going exactly how Kane wanted it to. Thomas Wakefield turned to Adrian. "Mr. Volkov, you have the floor to respond." Adrian stood. Evelyn could see the tremor in his hands, but his voice came out steady. "Marcus is right about one thing. I have been struggling. Losing my wife and daughter broke something in me that I'm still trying to fix. I'm not going to pretend otherwise." Kane's expression flickered with surprise. This wasn't the defensive response he'd expected. "But struggling doesn't mean failing," Adrian continued. "Despite my personal grief, this company's revenue is up 8% year over year. We've closed major contracts. Employee retention is at an all-time high. Our fundamentals are stronger than they've been in a decade. The stock volatility Marcus mentioned? That's artificial panic created by coordinated investor exits that happened to occur right when Marcus needed them to." He nodded to Patricia, who pulled up a new presentation. "Speaking of Marcus's financing, let's talk about where his money actually comes from." The next slides showed the shell companies, the offshore accounts, the connections to the Russian oligarch under investigation for money laundering. Kane's lawyers immediately started whispering to him, but Adrian kept going. Marcus has built a career on acquiring companies and stripping them for parts. 12 companies in 10 years. Every single one of them lost at least half their workforce within 2 years of acquisition. 3 of them don't exist anymore. He's not offering stable leadership. He's offering systematic destruction dressed up in the language of shareholder value. This is slander, Kane said sharply. Those companies were failing before I acquired them. They were struggling, not failing. There's a difference. And you turned struggle into death because it was profitable. Adrian's voice was hard now. But what's really interesting is how you knew exactly when to launch this takeover, how you knew about the foundation before we announced it, how you had media hit pieces ready to go the same day we went public. He looked directly at Rebecca Morrison. Because you had someone feeding you information from inside this boardroom. Someone who was supposed to be acting in the company's best interests, but was actually sabotaging us for her own benefit. Rebecca's face went pale. That's absurd. I would never… Patricia, show them the emails. The screen filled with Rebecca's correspondence with Kane, every damning message, every betrayal, every piece of evidence that she'd been working against Volkov Industries for months. The room erupted. Board members talking over each other, Rebecca trying to explain, her voice getting shriller with each denial. Kane's lawyers demanding to know how Adrian had obtained private communications. Thomas Wakefield pounding the table for order. This is illegal, Rebecca shouted. You can't use illegally obtained evidence. I can use it to demonstrate that your vote should be invalidated due to conflict of interest, Adrian shot back. You've been coordinating with Marcus to undermine this company. Everything you've said about my fitness to lead has been part of a conspiracy to facilitate a hostile takeover funded by questionable money sources. Enough! Thomas's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone sit down. Now. The room slowly quieted. Rebecca was crying angry tears. Kane looked furious but controlled. The other board members looked shocked and confused and angry in various combinations. These are serious allegations, Thomas said heavily. Rebecca, do you deny sending these emails? They're taken out of context. Marcus and I were discussing legitimate concerns about Adrian's leadership. You told him about private board discussions. You coordinated timing of investor exits. You suggested filing a false police report against Ms. Hart. Thomas's expression was granite. That's not expressing concerns. That's corporate sabotage. She should be removed from the board, Sarah Williams said, immediately. And we should be investigating whether Kane's acquisition proposal was ever made in good faith or if this was fraud from the beginning. Kane stood again. Let's all take a breath. Yes, Rebecca and I had conversations. Yes, some of them were perhaps inappropriate. But the fundamental question remains, is Adrian Volkov capable of leading this company? Look at him. Look at what he's become. A man who has dinner with ghosts, who creates expensive memorials and calls them philanthropy, who promotes his girlfriend to positions she's not qualified for. These are not the actions of a stable leader. She's not my girlfriend, Adrian said quietly. And the foundation isn't a memorial. It's a commitment to turning loss into something meaningful, something that actually helps people instead of destroying them for profit. He pulled out the blue egg, the first one he'd given Evelyn, and set it on the table. This represents Polaris, the North Star. My daughter wanted to walk on Mars. She had dreams that were bigger than herself. And I'm honoring those dreams by helping other children reach for the same impossible goals. Adrian's voice cracked, but he kept going. You want to know if I'm stable? If I'm fit to lead? Here's the truth. I'm broken in ways I'll never fully heal from. I miss my family every single day. Some mornings I don't want to get out of bed. Some nights I can't sleep because the guilt is too heavy. But I'm still here. I'm still fighting. And I'm still capable of running this company while also being human enough to grieve. The room was silent. Evelyn watched the board members' faces, trying to read which way they were leaning. David Chen looked supportive. Sarah Williams was nodding, but the others were harder to read. The question isn't on whether I'm broken, Adrian continued. The question is whether you want a leader who's honest about being human or a vulture who'll tear this company apart while pretending it's for everyone's good. Because that's the real choice. Not stable versus unstable. Human versus monster. Kane's expression was cold. Emotional manipulation. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Adrian can't separate his personal trauma from professional decision-making. And now he's trying to make you feel guilty for doing what's right for the company. What's right for the company is keeping it whole. Evelyn said. She hadn't planned to speak, but the words came out anyway. I know I'm not supposed to talk. I'm not a board member. I'm just the waitress who got in over her head. But I've spent the last 2 weeks learning everything about this company and what Marcus Kane does to companies. And I'm telling you, if you vote for him, you're not saving Volkov Industries. You're killing it. Ms. Hart, you're not authorized. Thomas started, but Evelyn kept going. 14,000 people work for this company. 14,000 people who have families and mortgages and lives that depend on their paychecks. If Kane takes over, at least half of them will lose their jobs within a year. Not because they're not good at what they do, not because the company can't afford them, but because Kane's business model is slash and burn. Cut everything that doesn't produce immediate profit and sell what's left. She pulled up her research on the screen. Here's what happened to Meridian Tech after Kane acquired them. 3,000 employees, down to 800 in 18 months. Here's Coastal Industries, 2,000 employees, down to 400. We've seen this, Rebecca said sharply. You showed it already. We get it. Marcus has made tough decisions. Tough decisions? Evelyn's voice rose. These aren't tough decisions. These are people's lives. Real people with real families who lost everything because Marcus Kane saw an opportunity for profit. And you're about to let him do the same thing here. The foundation, Kane said, changing tactics. Let's talk about the foundation. 50 million pounds of company money, personal money, Adrian interrupted. Not a penny came from company funds. I seeded it entirely from my own assets. Assets that are tied up in company stock. Assets that lose value when the company's stock drops, which it has, repeatedly, due to your erratic behavior. Kane was smooth again, controlled. And the timing is suspect. Launch a charity right before a board vote. Give some scholarships. Generate positive press. It's reputation management, not genuine philanthropy. The students don't care about my reputation, Adrian said. They care that they're getting opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. Maya Chen is studying astrophysics at Cambridge because of the foundation. James Morrison is dancing with the Royal Ballet training program. 8 other students are pursuing dreams that were impossible before we helped them. That's real. That matters. It's a distraction from the core issue, your fitness to lead. Thomas Wakefield held up a hand. I think we've heard enough from both sides. The board needs to deliberate in private. Adrian, Marcus, Ms. Hart, please step outside while we discuss and vote. Evelyn's heart sank. This was it. The moment everything came down to numbers and votes and whether the board valued humanity over profit. Adrian stood, grabbed the blue egg, and walked out. Evelyn followed. Patricia was close behind, looking pale. They ended up in Adrian's office, waiting. The silence was suffocating. We did everything we could, Patricia said quietly. The emails, the financing, the foundation. If it's not enough, then it's not enough. Adrian was staring out the window at London spread below him. At least we tried. At least we fought. Evelyn wanted to say something comforting, but the words stuck in her throat. She'd pushed so hard for this, sacrificed her job, her privacy, her sense of safety, and it still might not be enough. Her phone buzzed, a text from the unknown number that had been helping them. You're braver than you think, both of you, regardless of how this ends. Who keeps texting you? Adrian asked. I don't know. Someone inside your company who's been feeding us information about Kane. Friend or enemy? Friend, I think. Or at least someone who wants Kane to lose as badly as we do. They waited for 40 minutes that felt like hours. Every minute stretched into eternity. Every sound in the hallway made Evelyn jump, thinking it was someone coming to deliver the verdict. Finally, Patricia's phone rang. She answered, listened, hung up. They're ready for you. The walk back to the boardroom felt like a death march. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Adrian's face was carved from stone. They entered together, sat down in the same seats, faced the 11 people who held their future in their hands. Thomas Wakefield looked exhausted. We've deliberated and voted, but before I announce the results, I want to say something. This has been one of the most difficult decisions I've faced in 40 years of board service. There are no easy answers here, no perfect solutions. He looked at Rebecca Morrison, who was staring at the table. Rebecca, you're removed from the board effective immediately. Your actions constitute a clear breach of fiduciary duty. We'll be pursuing legal action for the damages caused by your collusion with Mr. Kane. Rebecca stood without a word and walked out, her lawyers trailing behind her.
The door closed behind them with a soft click.
Thomas turned to Kane. Marcus, your acquisition proposal is rejected. The board does not believe your financing meets our ethical standards, and the evidence of coordination with a board member to manipulate this process is deeply troubling. You're welcome to submit a new proposal in the future if you can address these concerns. But today's vote is no. Evelyn felt her breath catch. They'd won. They'd actually won. But Thomas wasn't finished. However, the board has significant concerns about the company's direction under current leadership. Adrian, we recognize that you're dealing with tremendous personal loss, but the volatility of recent months has been genuinely concerning. The board is voting to implement a co-CEO structure for the next 12 months. You'll share leadership with David Chen, who will focus on day-to-day operations while you focus on strategic vision and the foundation. Adrian's expression was unreadable. You're saying I'm not capable of running my own company. We're saying you need support, and we're providing it in a way that protects both you and the company. Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. Take it, or we'll vote to remove you entirely and install David as sole CEO. Those are the options. The room was silent. Evelyn watched Adrian process this. The partial victory, the loss of control, the acknowledgement that he was broken even if he was still standing. She wanted to tell him to fight, to refuse, to demand everything or nothing, but she also understood what Thomas was really offering. A way forward that didn't require Adrian to pretend he was fine when he wasn't. A structure that acknowledged his humanity while protecting the company he'd built. I accept, Adrian said quietly. Co-CEO with David. 12-month review. Fine. And the foundation remains separate from company operations, Thomas continued. No company resources. No using your position to promote it. It exists independently or not at all. Agreed. Thomas nodded. Then we're adjourned. David, Adrian, my office in 30 minutes to discuss transition logistics. Everyone else, thank you for your patience through this difficult process. The board members filed out. Kane left without a word. His lawyers already on their phones, probably planning their next move. David Chen shook Adrian's hand, said something too quiet for Evelyn to hear, and followed the others out. And then it was just Evelyn and Adrian and Patricia in the empty boardroom. We won, Evelyn said. Kane's gone. The company's safe. Did we win? Adrian was still holding the blue egg, turning it over in his hands. I just lost half my authority. I'm being babysat by my own board. They basically said I'm too broken to be trusted alone. They said you're human, and that humans need support. That's not the same as broken. Feels the same from where I'm sitting? Patricia cleared her throat. I'm going to give you two a moment. Adrian, I'll see you in Thomas's office in 25 minutes. Don't be late. She left. Evelyn and Adrian sat in silence, the morning sun streaming through the windows, the city alive below them, 14,000 people going about their jobs completely unaware that their futures had just been decided by 11 people in a boardroom. Thank you, Adrian said finally, for everything. For fighting when I wanted to give up, for believing in the foundation when I thought it was just vanity, for... He stopped. For reminding me that it's okay to be broken as long as you're still trying. You're not broken. You're grieving. There's a difference. Everyone keeps saying that, but it doesn't feel different. It feels like I'm drowning, and everyone's watching, and I can't ask for help because asking for help means admitting I can't do this alone. Evelyn reached across the table and took his hand. You're not alone. You have David now. You have the board supporting you. You have 14,000 employees who just kept their jobs because you fought for them. And you have me, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything. Adrian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I can actually do this, run a company, while also building a foundation, while also trying to heal from losing everything that mattered. But I want to try. And that's something. That has to be something. It's everything, Evelyn said. 6 months ago, you were having dinner with ghosts and leaving eggs behind like you were trying to buy your way back to them. Now you're helping real students achieve real dreams. That's not nothing. That's legacy. Adrian was quiet for a long time. Then he set the blue egg on the table between them. Keep this. You're the one who understood what it meant before I did. You're the one who turned grief into purpose. The foundation is as much yours as it is mine.
I can't accept. You can, and you will. Consider it payment for saving my company. And my life, probably. He stood, pulled her to her feet. Come on, I have a meeting with Thomas and David. You should be there too. You're on the foundation board. That makes you part of this, whether you like it or not. They walked through the building together, past employees who whispered and stared, past executives who looked relieved or disappointed depending on which side they'd been on. Evelyn felt the weight of their attention, but she didn't shrink from it anymore. She'd earned her place here. Maybe not through traditional channels, but earned it nonetheless. The meeting with Thomas and David was surprisingly straightforward. David would handle operations, Adrian would handle strategy and major decisions, and they'd present a united front to investors and the media. The foundation would continue independently with full transparency about its finances and governance. Adrian would take 1 day a week to focus exclusively on foundation work without company obligations. This could actually work, David said as they wrapped up. If we're honest about it, if we stop pretending everything's fine and just acknowledge that running a company while dealing with personal trauma requires support. Revolutionary concept, Adrian said dryly. A CEO who's allowed to be human. More revolutionary than you'd think. Thomas smiled slightly. Most boards would have forced you out entirely. We're trying something different here. Don't make us regret it. I'll do my best not to have any more public meltdowns. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be honest. If you're struggling, say so. If you need help, ask for it. That's the deal. Adrian nodded slowly. I can do that, I think. They shook hands. Evelyn followed Adrian back to his office, both of them exhausted and wired and trying to process what had just happened. They'd won, but it didn't feel like victory, more like survival, like they'd made it through the storm, but the ocean was still rough, and there were more storms coming. What now? Evelyn asked. Now I figure out how to actually run a company with someone looking over my shoulder. Now you figure out how to build a foundation from scratch with no experience and unlimited scrutiny. Now we both try not to screw up so badly that we prove Kane was right about us all along. Sounds exhausting. It is. Adrian pulled out his phone. But first I need to do something I should have done months ago. He made a call. Evelyn heard a woman answer, older voice, cautious. Mother, it's Adrian. I know we haven't spoken since the funeral, but His voice cracked. I need help. I can't do this alone anymore. Can we talk, please? Evelyn stepped out of the office to give him privacy. She found Patricia in the hallway, looking relieved and worried in equal measure. Is he okay? Patricia asked. I don't know, but he's trying. That's more than he was doing a month ago. And you? Are you okay? Evelyn considered the question. Was she okay? She'd lost her job, gained a position she wasn't qualified for, been investigated by the police, had her name dragged through the media, and helped fight a corporate battle she barely understood. Her life was unrecognizable from what it had been 6 weeks ago. I'm terrified, she admitted. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyway. So maybe that's okay. Maybe okay doesn't mean comfortable. Maybe it just means still moving forward. Patricia smiled. You're going to be fine, both of you. It'll be messy and complicated and probably terrible sometimes. But you'll be fine. Evelyn hoped she was right. She pulled out her phone and texted the unknown number. Thank you for the help. We won. Barely, but we won. The response came immediately. You're welcome. And Evelyn, you were never invisible. You just needed a reason to let people see you. Monsieur Marcus from the restaurant. It had been him all along, feeding them information, helping from the shadows. Evelyn felt a rush of gratitude for the cranky head waiter who'd hired her and yelled at her, and somehow cared enough to make sure she didn't fail. She texted back. Job still available if I need it? Always. But you won't need it. You've got bigger things ahead. Don't waste them. Adrian emerged from his office looking emotionally wrecked, but somehow lighter. She wants to meet for dinner. My mother. Tonight. First time we've spoken in 4 years. That's good, right? I don't know. Maybe. She was furious with me after the funeral, said I was dishonoring Natasha's memory with my grief, that I needed to pull myself together and move on. We fought, and I told her I never wanted to see her again, and he stopped. I've been alone for so long because I pushed everyone away. Maybe it's time to stop doing that. Maybe, Evelyn agreed,
Or maybe you were alone because nobody understood what you needed until you found people who did. Either way, you're not alone anymore. They stood in the hallway of Volkov Industries headquarters, two people who'd come from completely different worlds and somehow ended up fighting the same battle. The building hummed with activity around them, employees working, meetings happening, a company continuing to exist because they'd refused to let it die. "What are you going to do?" Adrian asked. "Now that you're officially a foundation board member with no actual foundation experience?" "I'm going to talk to the students, the 10 we gave scholarships to. I'm going to learn their stories and figure out how to find more students like them. I'm going to build something that actually matters instead of just talking about it." That sounds terrifying and impossible. Probably both, but so was fighting Marcus Kane, and we did that. Evelyn smiled. Besides, I'm done being scared of impossible things. Impossible just means nobody's done it yet. Adrian pulled her into a hug, sudden and tight and desperate. "Thank you," he whispered, "for seeing me when I was invisible, for understanding what the eggs meant, for fighting for something you had no reason to fight for." "Thank you." Evelyn hugged him back, this broken billionaire who'd lost everything and somehow found a way to keep going. "Thank you for having dinner with ghosts, for turning grief into art, for showing me that being human isn't weakness. It's the only thing that actually matters." They pulled apart. Adrian wiped his eyes. Evelyn straightened her borrowed suit, and together they walked back into the chaos of a company that needed saving and a foundation that needed building and lives that were messy and complicated and somehow still worth living. 3 months later, Evelyn stood in front of 50 students at the first official Anna Volkov Foundation Scholarship Ceremony. The event was held in a university auditorium, not a fancy ballroom. The students wore regular clothes, not formal attire. Everything was deliberately unpretentious, a celebration of potential rather than wealth. Adrian sat in the front row next to his mother, who'd flown in from St. Petersburg for the occasion. Their relationship was still fragile, still healing, but they were trying. That was something. David Chen was there too, along with several Volkov Industries board members. The company had stabilized under the co-CEO structure. Stock price was climbing again. 3 major contracts closed in the last quarter. Adrian was learning to delegate, to ask for help, to accept that being broken didn't mean being useless. "When Adrian first told me about the eggs," Evelyn said to the assembled crowd, "I saw expensive art, beautiful objects with hidden meanings. But what I didn't understand then was that they weren't just memorials, they were conversations. Adrian's way of talking to the people he'd lost about the world they left behind." She held up the blue egg, her egg now, though she'd tried multiple times to give it back and Adrian had refused. "This represents Polaris, the North Star, and the student who inspired it wanted to walk on Mars. She never got that chance. But because of her father's love for her, 50 other students are getting chances they wouldn't have had. That's not just legacy, that's transformation." The students applauded, some of them were crying. Most of them had stories similar to Anna's, big dreams, limited resources, passion that exceeded their circumstances. And now they had opportunities. Maya Chen, the girl who taught herself calculus, was in the front row. She'd started her astrophysics program at Cambridge and was already making waves with her research proposals. James Morrison, the homeless dancer, was performing with the Royal Ballet's junior company and being courted by major choreographers. 48 other students, each with their own dreams, each with their own impossible goals that were suddenly possible. After the ceremony, Adrian approached Evelyn. "That was perfect. Natasha would have loved it. Anna, too. They would have loved the students. The speeches were just words. Words matter. You taught me that." He paused. "I'm having dinner tonight at Le Jardin Éternel. Same table, same time. Want to join me?" Evelyn smiled. "Still ordering borscht? Still can't taste it, but yes, some rituals are worth keeping, though I'm thinking of adding something to the routine." "What's that?" "Actually eating the soup. Maybe inviting my mother to join me sometimes. Maybe acknowledging that dinner with memories is fine, but dinner with living people is better." Adrian's expression was soft. "I'll always miss them. Always wish they were here. But I'm starting to understand that honoring them doesn't mean staying frozen in grief. It means living in a way that would make them proud. I think you're doing that. The foundation, the company. All of it. We're doing that. You're part of this now. Can't get rid of me that easily. Evelyn laughed. Wouldn't dream of it. They walked out of the auditorium together into the London afternoon. The city sprawled around them, millions of people living their lives, completely unaware of the small battle that had been fought in boardrooms and press conferences and late-night planning sessions. But those 50 students knew. The 14,000 employees who'd kept their jobs knew. And somewhere maybe a fierce ballet dancer and a little girl who'd wanted to touch the stars were watching and understanding that love doesn't end with death. It transforms. It becomes scholarship funds and board meetings and awkward dinners with estranged mothers and second chances for people who thought they'd never get one. Evelyn's phone buzzed. A text from Maya Chen. Thank you for believing in us. I'm going to make you proud. She showed Adrian. He read it and smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and didn't look like it hurt. They're going to change the world, he said. These kids, they're going to do things we can't even imagine. Anna would have been one of them, walking on Mars, solving impossible problems. She still is. Through them, through the foundation, through every student who gets a chance because I loved my daughter enough to turn loss into something meaningful. Adrian looked at the egg in Evelyn's hand. Keep it. Remind yourself what's possible when you refuse to let grief destroy you, when you choose to build instead of break. Evelyn closed her fingers around the blue egg, feeling its weight, its history, its promise. I will. And Adrian, thank you for having dinner with ghosts. Without that, none of this would exist. Thank you for seeing past the madness to what I was actually trying to say, for understanding that sometimes love looks like expensive trinkets and cold soup and conversations with people who aren't there anymore. They parted ways at the curb. Adrian headed to his dinner reservation, carrying his memories and his eggs and his slowly healing heart. Evelyn went home to her apartment, bigger now, in a better neighborhood, paid for by her foundation salary, and pulled out her laptop. There were scholarship applications to review, partnership proposals from universities in 3 countries, a waiting list of students who needed help and deserved chances. The work was endless and overwhelming and somehow exactly what she'd been searching for without knowing it. She looked at the blue egg sitting on her desk, catching the afternoon light, throwing tiny rainbows across her notes. A memorial that had become a mission. Grief that had transformed into purpose. A broken billionaire and an invisible waitress who'd somehow saved each other by refusing to accept that loss had to mean the end. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not that grief could be overcome or that wounds could fully heal, but that broken people could still build beautiful things, that loss could coexist with hope, that the hardest battles weren't between companies or investors or hostile takeovers. They were between giving up and keeping going, between letting trauma define you and choosing to define yourself despite it. Evelyn had spent 30 years being invisible, convinced that quiet meant powerless. Adrian had spent 4 years being paralyzed, convinced that broken meant finished. Together, they discovered that neither was true, that voices could be found, that purpose could emerge from pain, that impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. She opened her email and started responding to scholarship applications, one student at a time, one dream at a time, building a legacy that honored the dead by investing in the living. Somewhere across London, Adrian was ordering borscht he still couldn't taste and setting a small jeweled egg on the table. But this time, he wasn't alone. His mother sat across from him and they were talking, hesitant and awkward but trying. And somewhere beyond the city, beyond the mathematics of stock prices and board votes, 2 ghosts were finally at rest. Because their husband and father had learned the hardest lesson of all, that loving the dead didn't require abandoning the living. That memory and future could exist side by side. That the best way to honor those you've lost is to keep becoming someone they'd be proud to know. The dinner would be difficult. The foundation would face challenges. The company would have bad quarters. Adrian would have days where he couldn't get out of bed. Evelyn would have moments where imposter syndrome nearly crushed her. But they'd keep going. Because that's what you do when you've been broken and somehow found a way to keep standing. You keep going. You build something meaningful from the ruins. You turn your worst moments into someone else's best chances. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover that the person you saved wasn't the one you thought it was. That in fighting to help a grieving billionaire keep his empire, a quiet waitress had actually been saving herself. That's the thing about grief and loss and impossible battles. You never know who you'll become on the other side. You just have to be brave enough to keep going and find out.